Gonna go ahead and get started, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. We want to be respectful to our speakers' times. They have short windows today, so we're going to keep this moving on time. My name is Colin Wellenkamp. I am the Executive Director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. Welcome to our virtual annual meeting. And joining me on staff side is Tiara Loomis. She's our Operations Manager. Her and our Government Affairs Director, Brant Thornton, are somehow able to make this all work. Brant is doubling as our stage manager, God bless him, as well during this. So he is handling the technical details because I might have a green thumb because when it comes to tech, I am all thumbs. So just a couple of real quick safety tips on the technology. If you are dialing in only, which I know plenty of you are, and you want to raise your hand so that Brant can recognize you to ask a question, make a comment, or speak, hit *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand so Brant can elevate you to be heard. Brant, any other safety tips or notes we should pass along to folks?
No, that is perfect.
Okay, great. At this point, we will begin, and I will hand it over to Mayor Gallagher to get us started. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to the virtual version of our 9th annual meeting of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. My name is Bob Gallagher. I'm the mayor of Bettendorf, Iowa, and co-chair of the MRCTI. Presiding over this meeting with me is my co-chair, Sharon, Weston, Broome, the mayor of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As many of you are aware, we were originally scheduled to be in Bemidji, Minnesota this year for our annual meeting, but as has become the norm for many of us now, we had to move our meeting into the virtual realm so we could keep folks safe and still ensure valuable participation from our partners. I wanted to assure everyone that the decision to alter our gatherings was made in close coordination and consultation with Mayor Albrecht of Bemidji, and I'm happy to share that Bemidji will still host our annual meeting in 2023. In 2021, we still plan to meet in Mayor Broome's city in celebration of the Baton Rouge 300th birthday. And in 2022, we will join Mayor Krewson in St. Louis for MRCTI's 10th anniversary. Right now, however, it's my esteemed honor to declare the 2020 annual meeting on the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative officially open. We have a tremendous meeting ahead for all of our mayors and guests this year. I want to acknowledge and thank the MRCTI team for putting together this, especially this year. Tiara Loomis, our operations manager, and Brant Thornton, our government relations director, have done an awesome job of preparing us for this conference, and I hope it runs smoothly. I will recognize my co-chair, Mayor Broome of Baton Rouge, for her opening remarks, which will lead us into our first presentation today. Mayor Broome.
Thank you, Mayor Gallagher. And yes, we are certainly looking forward to seeing everyone here in the capital city of Louisiana next September 15th through 17th. We're already planning a terrific experience for everyone that includes our state legislature, governor, and the very best history, heritage, and culture Louisiana has to offer. Our water campus, the second of its kind, right behind Mayor Buell's National Mississippi River Museum and Research Center in Dubuque, our water campus has reached global status. Our first session today is entitled A New Vision for Our Corridor, Our Future. So for this morning, we are going to engage with 3 presentations that present new designs, direction, and emphasis for the Mississippi River Corridor. To lead our first conversation, I will recognize Mayor Kevin Smith of Helena-West, Arkansas, and Mayor Lyda Krewson of St. Louis, Missouri. Mayor Smith, please take it from here.
Well, thank you, Mayor Broome and Mayor Gallagher, and I'm excited to introduce our first speaker this morning, along with Mayor Krewson of St. Louis. Caryl Stern is the Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation, headquartered in my state of Arkansas. The Walton Family Foundation is now the only major philanthropic organization conducting work along the entire length of the Mississippi River. The longest-standing partnership between MRCTI and WFF has proven to be a game changer for the Mississippi River Corridor. An initial grant from Walton in 2011 made MRCTI possible in the first place. From 2012 to 2020, WFF has partnered with MRCTI through 5 grants. The first 3 grants were intended to build MRCTI into a viable organization of mayors from all 10 states along the Mississippi River, with a mission focused around achieving clean water and restoring the Mississippi River's natural ecosystem based on both economic and quality of life improvement motives. Today, thanks to the Walton Family Foundation, MRCTI is an association with 100 United States mayors. Together, MRCTI and Walton have achieved much, including deploying the Mississippi's first private carried water quality monitor, increasing the capacity of the EPA and USDA watershed protection grants, deploying 2 environmental impact bonds for natural infrastructure, and formed a partnership with Walmart stores to broaden their nutrient reduction program. On a personal note, the Walton Family Foundation has gone above and beyond to help my community of Helena-West Helena in Arkansas, located on the Mississippi River. And a personal note that this is certainly an honor and a privilege to be able to be part of an introduction. At this point, I want to turn it over to Mayor Krewson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Smith. And let me just begin by saying good morning to all the mayors and all the people that are on this conference. I am so excited to hear from our first guest today as well. I'm the first woman mayor of St. Louis, and so I certainly appreciate and admire the trailblazer that Ms. Caryl Stern has proven herself to be. Before coming aboard to lead the Walton Family Foundation, Ms. Stern was president and CEO of UNICEF USA. She was also named one of 25 women changing the world in 2017 by People magazine. 20 most influential moms of 2017 by Family Circle, 25 moms we love by Working Mother magazine, and 10 women to watch by the Jewish Women's International. Ms. Stern, thank you for being with us today. It's such a pleasure to have you, and thank you for all of the Walton Foundation's work to support our cities collectively through MRCTI. As you know, MRCTI is headquartered here in St. Louis, and Walton's support of St. Louis educational programs since 1999 has been indispensable to our innovation and teacher diversity. I do want to also give a shout out and a thank you to the director of your environment program, Moira McDonald. Moira has been with us since the beginning, and we would not have the MRCTI Association at all if it were not for her patience, her guidance, and her faith in the Mississippi Rivers and Towns mayors. Moira is truly an asset to your team and to our team. So just as a reminder for all of you on this Zoom, or whatever we're on today, Zoom, if you have comments or questions, please place them in the chat box. So that was the my housekeeping duty here today. Please welcome Caryl Stern, Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Mayor Krewson, thank you. Mayor Smith, Mayor Broome and Mayor Gallagher, thank you as well. And thank you to all of you for inviting me to speak to all of you today. I'm excited about it. You know, as I was putting my comments together, I grew up in New York, and as a typical Northern New Yorker, you know, grew up in the mountains, spent most of my childhood on the East Coast with a couple of trips to California. But by the time I graduated college, really didn't know the heartland of our country at all. And I was offered a teaching fellowship at Western Illinois University in Macomb, Illinois, and I flew out there for the interview. And I asked them, well, you know, where do you go when you want to think? You know, I was used to going up on the top of a mountain. Where do you go when you want to think? And they said to me, you go down to the Mississippi. So I took a drive down the Mississippi River and was struck, first of all, by just how large and beautiful it was because, you know, again, this is early 1970s and had a very New Yorker's view of the world, I have to be honest. And so no river could be bigger than the Hudson, you know. So I went and I was struck by it and happened to be there at the time that the bald eagles were migrating to the community. And so spent an entire day flat on my back taking pictures with what was then a real camera with film of the eagles. Came back to New York, told everybody about it, had to wait my 2 weeks for my film to get developed. And when they did, of course, all I got were these little specks in the sky because the camera couldn't capture it. So we've come a long way since then, but I was really struck by the beauty of the river and have since taken a steamship cruise down the whole river. So have passed by many of your towns and communities. So I'm excited to join you today. Hopefully you're all familiar with the Walton Family Foundation, but in case you're not, we are a family-led foundation. We're dedicated to creating access to opportunity for people and for communities at large, you know, and we do our work through three primary areas. We're working to improve K-12 education so that every child, and we do mean every child, in this country can attend a high-quality school. We focus on building a better quality of life for people in what we call our home region, in the backyard of Sam and Helen Walton, where they got their start and first found opportunity in the wonderful state of Northwest Arkansas and the Arkansas-Mississippi Delta, my new home community. And through our environment program, we're investing in healthier rivers, healthier oceans that create opportunities for the people and the communities that depend on them. And I'm incredibly glad to be here with this group of mayors. You know, we believe that mayors, you know, you are the first responders. You're the chief when it comes to living with the Mississippi River and the real and stark consequences that a changing climate is having on its towns and cities. You're the chief innovation officers for your communities. You're helping to prevent and mitigate flooding, and often without enough support to do the job. And maybe it's more accurate to say that you're the chief everything officers, because you're charged with figuring out how to prevent the worst impacts of flooding before they happen, leading the community through that devastation, and then slogging through the recovery. And, you know, my work in emergency response over the 14 years that I led UNICEF USA taught me that there really are three parts to the emergency: preventing it, rescue and recovery, and building back better. The Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative has provided that vehicle for bringing together mayors from up and down the river to partner in ways that allow for local experience and input at the level of mayors, and then laddering up to a more unified agenda for addressing needs and opportunities. And at the Walton Family Foundation, we believe that those closest to the problem are often closest to the solution. So we recognize the need, the real need, to scale local knowledge into a strong collective voice that can drive meaningful change and investment. You know, science tells us that things are going to be a lot more challenging in the Mississippi River Basin over the next few years and over the next few decades. The increased rainfall that has hammered the basin for the past several years is likely to continue. We're going to need to adjust for this new wet normal. And climate change is bringing additional risks in the form of storms. We're witnessing that today, and floods at a time when we have, you know, an aging river infrastructure. And the stakes along the Mississippi River are increasingly high. The river is a living, breathing system that connects people in the heartland of the country, and it's a backbone of the American economy. The Mississippi drains nearly 40% of the nation's rivers along its paths, and it carries billions of dollars worth of goods each year. So what do we do? Moving forward, we believe that leaders at all levels, representing the communities as diverse as the Mississippi Basin itself, need to be a driving force in creating a vision for managing the river in an integrated fashion. We must think of the river as a system, and each of us as a part of that system, a respective part in that system. Decisions that are made upriver have produced profound effects downriver, and some of the lessons learned downriver should be applied upriver. Our fates are inextricably intertwined, and we can no longer afford to operate independent of one another. That's why we have to build coalitions and partnerships to improve water quality across the entire system. It's clear that all of us, farmers, ag leaders, urban planners, foundation directors, business executives, government officials, we will need to work collaboratively to champion the natural infrastructure solutions that are going to benefit us all. Mayors, farmers, residents, we can all be partners in restoring the river and embracing approaches that follow nature's lead and produce real results. At the Walton Family Foundation, we're working to finalize our strategy for the next 5 years. We know it's going to take cooperation and partnership at all levels and across all sectors to make change at the scale of the mighty Mississippi. We believe solutions that take their cues from nature can reduce flooding, can rebuild coastal wetlands, and can improve water quality. These solutions are suitable for communities, for businesses, and for the river's environment. On behalf of the Walton Family Foundation, I look forward personally, as well as our entire team, to the continued partnership with the Mississippi River communities and continuing to build a better future where the river's environment and economy are both stronger together. I'm very pleased to have two of our program officers with us today, Kristen Trotz and Paul Wolf. The three of us are here to answer questions. The two of them were technically on program issues, myself about the foundation. Thank you for having us all here today.
Thank you, Ms. Stern, for that excellent presentation. And again, it's a personal honor for me, for all you all at Walton Family Foundation has done for my community. So a personal shout out. Thank you. We hope you may have a moment for a question or two from our audience. Those mayors and attendees that wish to ask a question can do so either through the chat function or by clicking the raise your hand button. And Brant, who is our stage manager, will recognize you so you can ask your question. So Brant, where I am, I can't really tell, so I'm going to leave it up to you to let us know. Mayor Broome, I think, has a question.
Yes, I'm trying to locate the raise your hand, but in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and I did it literally. I do have a question for Ms. Stern, and thank you so much, Ms. Stern, for that information. I took a few notes, and as the first woman mayor of my city, like Mayor Krewson, I too really want to thank you for all you've done to be a true change agent, and certainly given your background in working with children and dealing with natural disasters across the globe, such as your work combating Ebola and the Zika epidemics. The COVID-19 pandemic must really hit home for you. You know, MRCTI has been successful in accumulating partners and resources across the globe to help us control contagion in our cities collectively and prepare for overlapping disasters such as hurricanes in my area, which we've been dealing with this heightened hurricane season for the past month or so. One of those partners that we have is Rotary International, which, like UNICEF, work to eradicate deadly infectious diseases. And I know most of our work with Walton is focused on natural resource management. But I'm wondering if there's room to expand our portfolio with you on the humanitarian side, whether it be through your home region programs or otherwise. Is this something we could consider with you?
We absolutely can talk about it. You know, I can tell you that when I took this position, the joke in my house was I no longer need to keep a suitcase packed for emergencies. And I had 5 weeks in the office before COVID hit and we went to work from home. So, you know, the skills you take from one job that you think you'll never use again proved to be very useful. You know, obviously all of these issues are intertwined. And when our children are denied education, when our children are denied everything we want them to have for their future, we need to tie all of the things that we do together. And, you know, the success of all of our communities is dependent on that. You know, I described to our board that I believe as grown-ups, we live between two sayings. You know, we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us. And, you know, and for me, I have the privilege to stand on Sam and Helen Walton's shoulders, which were some pretty big shoulders to stand on. But we also borrow the earth from the kids we leave behind. And so, you know, when I look at the work you're doing for the river, obviously that's a big piece of it. But we want to secure the health and safety and education of those children so they can enjoy that river and they can benefit from the water and the economy it provides. So, you know, are there opportunities? We're always open to discussing opportunities. We do tend to fund, as I said, in those 3 streams, but you are all in our backyard for those of you in the Delta region, and clearly we can discuss those opportunities.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from mayors? If you have a question or want to find the raise your hand button, go to participants at the bottom, click on participants, and then the raise your hand button. Brant, do you see any other questions? All right. Okay. Well, once again, I want to thank Ms. Stern. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. We look forward to our continuing and partnership, our lasting and transformative partnership, because it's a little different when you invest in mayors, as you indicated in your presentation. I also want to
Mayor Gallagher.
Yes.
Hi, good. Sorry, this is Colin. Just had a question for Ms. Stern, if I may.
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
Thanks again for so much, Ms. Stern, for being with us and all your leadership. No, you got put into the fire right immediately as soon as you came aboard. So we do the hard stuff first, right?
Exactly.
But thank you for all your leadership and vision. Curious as to, in leading Walton, what do you see as the most significant challenges that the foundation really wants to tackle or make progress on over the next 5 years? What do you see as just absolutely, we absolutely have to make headway on top line items over the next few years?
You know, it's a great question, and we are launching our next 5-year strategy in January, so you will hear more detail on what I'm about to share. But, you know, we started this plan over a year ago, and it's ironic when you look at the events of this past summer, because the plan was built with several cross-cutting strategies that cut across the home region, K-12 education, and the environment, one of which was a theory of inclusion, that we have to make access to opportunity, to success, to achievement, to propelling moves forward. In all 3 have to be dependent on equal access for everyone. And I think, again, the events of this summer between COVID and the uprising across the nation is shining a spotlight on inequities that we know were there and providing a window of opportunity to address them. So that's one. I think secondarily, the problems in education have become much more apparent through what has happened through COVID. We have teachers who are being forced back into their classrooms right now, or going willingly, not necessarily forced, but they're going back into classrooms with ill preparation for what they're experiencing. Few have been, you know, really adequately prepared to teach remotely. Few have had the psychosocial training needed to help children through a computer screen, or to help children who are being denied normalcy right now because they're not in a classroom, and the many adults who might normally be able to see and foresee the problems they're experiencing. You know, I remember being in Houston after one of the really big storms when I was with UNICEF, and I happened to be in a first grade classroom and it rained. It was about a month after the storm. And I watched first graders cringe and go under their desks because they had just experienced a trauma that many of us had not foreseen the long-term impact on. So I think about COVID right now, and I think about young children in particular, many of whom will have experienced illness in the family, some unfortunately deaths in the family, and not only a few. A lot will have had changes in geography, a loss of a job, a change in the economic status of that family, and they're all walking back into a classroom with a teacher who has lived through that herself or himself. And we need to, as communities, really think through how we support our young people through the trauma they're experiencing, how we support our teachers in that process, and how we come up with new and creative solutions to the problem. And then we need to look at our earth and how we restore her, and in particular, water, and how we protect water, how we protect it not only for drinking and its usage, but for its passage. And we need to look at really good agricultural practices that are going to ensure our waterways. And clearly that's the challenge that we face collectively at this table. That we can't afford not to protect our waterways. And there are really good agricultural practices that we can employ that will make that difference. So our new strategies are focusing on empowering local communities. We are, I'm here today because you are the mayors. And because we really want to work with the next generation of leaders, we want to help to ensure equal access to leadership. We want to really find solutions in your backyards and bring them forward and share them and see how our voice can help amplify their voices.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, that is a great comprehensive answer, and we can certainly empathize with your comments around the trauma that our cities are going through. I have two daughters. So one of them is a second grader, and so this has been quite an experience for her, of course, and for all our kids. So we're most of our cities just reopened their schools, and we sent out 2,400 isolation gowns to help our cities equip their personnel that had to get the schools ready safely, and now clean the schools twice a day. So we're definitely with you on that, and look forward to that partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stern. I know that we're a different kind of organization than philanthropic world usually engages, but we're better mayors for our partnership with you and the help that you've provided. Thanks for your presentation and your comments today. We again look forward to our lasting and transformative partnership. And lastly,
Yes.
I too want to thank the foundations.
I can't hear anything.
Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, really, for having me here today, and thank you for your partnership and all the work that you're each doing. And two of my team are going to participate. I'm going to be signing off, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think I see Congressman McCollum. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Is there anything we need to do other than move forward, Brant or Colin?
No, I think we're good.
I see Dan Lund is here, Your Honor. Nice to see you. Okay. So
Yeah,
we're not.
I think we're looking for Mayor Carter.
I'm sorry?
I think we're looking.
No, we're not looking for Mayor Carter yet. Mayor Carter will be on in a few minutes. We're good to go.
Okay. Let's turn it over to our next speaker, but remain on the theme of new visions and designs for our Mississippi River. To set this conversation, I will welcome Mayor Dan Lund of Newport, Minnesota. Your Honor, you have the floor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor Gallagher. As you said, this is Dan Lund coming to you from Newport, Minnesota. We are situated just south of St. Paul along the banks of the Mississippi River. We will be joined to moderate this portion shortly by St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter. Newport has a long history. We were settled in 1837, more than 20 years prior to Minnesota statehood. and 1 year prior to the Pig's Eye settlement just a few miles upriver. While Newport was settled by Methodist missionaries with goals to convert the local Dakota and Chippewa to Christianity, Pig's Eye was founded by a French-Canadian bootlegger of the same moniker. Some of you probably already realized that Pig's Eye is what is known as St. Paul today. Only a few short years after settlement, it was renamed by a French priest. But it appears that the bootlegger had a better draw than the missionaries, as St. Paul has grown by leaps and bounds, while Newport continued its slow growth to the small community it is today. Both St. Paul and Newport are in the 4th Congressional District of Minnesota, which is important considering our next speaker. It is my absolute honor to introduce my city's member of Congress, Betty McCollum. She has represented the 4th District of Minnesota since 2001, and in that time has moved our state and our corridor forward. As a teacher, manager, former city council member, and state legislature, Ms. McCollum has tirelessly pursued excellence in education, environmental protection, and expanding healthcare. In 2019, at our Capitol meeting in Washington, Congresswoman McCollum became the chair of the Mississippi River Caucus. Since then, she has embraced her role with a new resolve and energy to lead the creation of a Mississippi River program, much like those that exist for the Great Lakes, Missouri River, Chesapeake Bay, Columbia River, and others. Believe it or not, but America's most important waterway, the Mississippi, does not have its own federal program for the entire river. The mayors of MRCTI proposed one be developed in 2013, but new large-scale infrastructure efforts were not in style at the time. Congresswoman McCollum wants to develop what could be the Mississippi River Valley's most consequential authorizing legislation since the inception of NESP, the Navigation Ecosystem Sustainability Program, back in 2007. We were happy to invite and have the acceptance of Congresswoman McCollum to talk with us this morning regarding her vision, and we are hopeful to assist in making it a new reality. Please welcome Congresswoman McCollum from the 4th District of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I know my Mayor Carter, will be with you as time permits. He's, as all of you are, very busy. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you at this virtual 2020 Mississippi River City and Towns Conference. But I want to take a moment, because I am in Washington, to just kind of reflect on what our situation is today. During this COVID-19 pandemic, I know that these are special, challenging times for local governments. I've been on the phone with my, of course, the capital city, St. Paul, as well as my suburban cities and Ramsey and Washington County, and the other cities I represent in Washington County. And as a former city council member, I understand how important the work is to the people you serve. You're responsible for things that touch people's daily lives in a way in which they know you're touching their daily life. The water that they drink from their tap, the streets that they drive on, the sidewalks we walk on. Well, I could go on and so much more. I too have had the barking dog calls at my home at 12 at night when I'm trying to sleep. So you're in the heart of everything that's going on in people's lives. And then you are the first line of defense in making sure that we have great first responders who we can rely on when the unthinkable happens. So I want to thank you for everything that you're doing and for your struggles at times during COVID to keep our basic services working at this time. They are vital, and so are your jobs. But we each have our own lane of government, and we work together to make sure that we serve our constituents, the joint constituents we have. So I really come to my role in government knowing that we work together, and that's how the public sees us and wants to see us. I believe that the federal government has an essential role to play in partnering with you, especially during this crisis. So I'm just going to highlight a few things going on in Washington right now because they impact us moving forward with developing a great river plan, but first and foremost, we have to deal with COVID. So many of you are aware of the Coronavirus Preparedness Response Supplemental Appropriations Act that we passed on March 4th. The Families First Coronavirus Act on March 18th, which guaranteed free coronavirus testing, established paid leave, and once again built on what we needed to do for your small businesses in your communities, as well as work with your public health agencies. And then the biggest one that people talk about was the CARES Act. That was in March 22nd. That was $2.2 trillion. It went to hospitals, healthcare providers, direct payments to individuals, small business loans, granted expanded unemployment benefits, and aid to local governments. And we've heard from local governments loud and clear that many of you were not in the CARES Act the way that you needed to be, in the way that you wanted to be. But sometimes in an emergency, you take the first step knowing that, you know, in this case, the next fire truck is pulling up right next to it. And that's what the Heroes and Act is. It's the next fire truck pulling up. So right now, as it left the House, it would be $3 trillion to protect the lives and livelihoods of American people. And I believe the lifeline of our democracy, which is our post office, and it would include direct and flexible aid to cities. So if you don't have it, my website can link you into finding out exactly how much aid would be going to your city in the HEROES Act. Because we know you've had unforeseen costs, even with the PPP Protection and Healthcare Enhancement Acts we've passed, businesses are still shut down and they're still struggling. But today we're going to take a few minutes and think about the future. Today we're going to talk about America's greatest river. Each one of you has a community that's deeply rooted in this American icon. And I know because my family's from South St. Paul. I grew up in South St. Paul. I grew up on the river. We have a term that we use sometimes, Your Honor, river rat, but we use it very affectionately, don't we? He's smiling. For a millennia, the Mississippi River has been an enduring and defining feature of North America. It's a spelling challenge. Every little kid likes to ask the other one, can you spell Mississippi? And it literally is the heartland of our nation. It begins in the cold glacier waters in the Northwoods of my state, Minnesota, and it weaves through 2,000 miles through vast forests and the plains to the warm shores of the Delta. It unites North and South, East and West, and directly links 10 states. It drains in watersheds in 31 states and provides drinking water for over 20 million Americans. And I think it will be even more Americans in the future. As it generates jobs and economic activity through shipping, I come from a barge town, recreation, tourism, and culture, which we are embracing in St. Paul through the leadership of our mayor. It is also, needs to be pointed out, a vital flyaway and habitat for 60% of North America's migratory birds, and so much other wildlife. So Mayor London and I and Mayor Carter, we're sending in our birds. They're coming down the flyway right now. They're leaving. But despite the major progress that we have taken to clean up the Mississippi River since the passage of the Clean Water Act, America's greatest river is still in a state of decline. It has resulted in more flooding, less wildlife, fewer jobs, and reduced recreational opportunities, and a higher cost for those communities to try to keep them safe from the river when it does rear its destructive head, and at the same time make sure that there's clean drinking water for the citizens that drink from the river. So in short, the Mississippi River, it's an American treasure. It's a national treasure, and we must work together to protect it. And during these extraordinary times of pandemic, the needs are also great that we focus on our river. We need to build back and we need to build stronger. We need to invest in the health of America and our environment and green infrastructure and the economic health of our communities. And by creating a new standard of care that will leave the Mississippi River better today and for the next generation. That's a central part of the work that we need to do together. Today, there are more than a dozen federal agencies and 75 federal programs and scores of state and local government agencies and private sector partners that are working on the Mississippi River. And this work often gets complicated and sometimes will even run at cross purposes. So 10 years ago, I authorized the Mississippi River Specials Resources Study. I worked through the National Park Service to inventory public and private entities along the river, helping to preserve our natural treasures and recognizing the Mississippi River's historic and cultural value to America. Now, as chair of the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, I want to work with partners like you to fulfill even a broader vision. The Mississippi River Restoration Resilience Strategy to enhance investments and coordination from the headwaters to the Delta to sustain our great river. The success of programs, as was pointed out by the mayor, Puget Sound, Chesapeake Bay, the Everglades, and notably closer to home for those of us in the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, show the impact of dedicating these funds, their ability to grow and sustain partnerships, and they also provide a model for assembling this initiative. The Mississippi River Restoration Initiative collaboration is now coming together with leadership from the National Wildlife Federation, Friends of the Mississippi River, and so many others that you all work with. This collaboration begins the scope of work outlined in the potential, and here come the initials, folks, get ready, MRRI. MRRI. So that's what we're probably going to be saying to keep this short now in the future. So make sure people know when you're talking about it, you describe what it is. So I took steps in the FY21 appropriation bills to lay a legislative foundation. In July, the House passed $36.8 billion in the FY21 Interior Funding Bill, which represents the largest investment in our environment and our communities since 2010. The bill moves us forward by investing in resources in ways that keep our communities safe and healthy, investing in protection and preservation of our landscapes and biodiversity. It makes significant investments in protecting and preserving our public lands, building resilience to climate change, strengthening America's environmental workforce, and ensuring access to safe drinking water. The bill also recognizes the Mississippi River from Minnesota to Mississippi and Louisiana as a vital American waterway. It directs the EPA to establish a river restoration resilience strategy in coordination with other federal agencies, as well as state, local, and tribal governments, with business and nonprofit stakeholders. By making this inventory and taking existing federal and state investments in the Mississippi River Basin, identifying the gaps, and making recommendations for policy action, we can better together leverage on improving water quality, restoring habitat and natural systems, improving navigation, eliminating aquatic species, and building on local resilience to natural disasters. These provisions lay the foundation for a first step that will be followed up by authorization to the Mississippi River Initiative. So moving forward on this vision, some of the most important commitments to the Mississippi River will be made by citizen commissioners, by county boards, and by city councils. The science that will drive our decisions will come out of our universities, laboratories. So we need to build and sustain partnerships that will involve everyone in this vital room. So I want to thank you for your investment in your communities rooted in this great American river we love, the Mississippi River. Partnerships start with commitments, and I want you to know I'm committed to this work, and I will continue to be a partner for you in Congress. So let's work together for funding and research that we need to jumpstart a new national commitment to America's best river, the Mississippi River. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We so appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Are you able to answer a few questions?
Sure.
Oh, wonderful.
I've got a few minutes.
Okay, great. As before, those mayors and attendees that wish to ask a question can do it either through the chat or by clicking the raise your hand button, and Brant will recognize you so you can ask your question. I'll get us started. Congresswoman, the mayors of MRCTI are developing program authorizing language that we hope we can show you and your team to work with the rest of the Mississippi River Caucus to build support around. Our effort to do that is being led by our Minnesota Chair, Mayor Dallas of Red Wing, and Mayor Carter. Does that sound like a valuable way to proceed? Are there any other ways we can be helpful to this effort?
Well, I think we've had some conversations with some of the partner organizations, and I really think that for this initiative, as the Great Lakes Initiative is so successful, it really is the people who are directly impacted daily with interaction with the river, and that's you. And so I think that there's nothing better than having the type of structure that you talked about with our mayors. And I was never a mayor, so I keep saying city council. Sorry, guys. And make sure that our city council are involved, are vitally important, because they're the link to county government, they're the link to state government, they're the link to federal government. You know, you're in the catbird seat as far as I'm concerned to get this initiative moving.
Well, thank you so much. With that, do we have any other questions from our other mayors?
Well, that's good. I'm a former high school teacher. I'm not going to call on anybody.
Yeah, let's call on some folks.
I do wish all of you good health and to be safe during this time of COVID. We're going to do everything we can. I'm talking to my Republican colleagues to get some bills moving, to get the budget online, done on time, and as well as working on another coronavirus package. So you have my commitment to be working on that. And until we can all be together on, in person in a room again, celebrating the great work we're about to start to do, I'm very happy that it worked out that I was able to be with you today. So all the best, stay healthy, and as Dr. Osterholm would say from Minnesota, wash your hands. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Mayor Lund?
Yes, sir.
Did you want to mention about your suggestion that our effort also include solid waste and plastics in what we propose to the Congresswoman?
Sure. So that's something near and dear to my heart. I actually live on the Mississippi River, and the volume of garbage that washes up on an annual basis is just amazing. It's disappointing, and I know that most of that comes through the storm sewers. So I think we have a real opportunity to clean up the river by capturing those plastics and waste before they enter the river, simply by catching them. And that technology exists today, and I think that would be a real popular way to get this started. So that's something that I would definitely support, and frankly, I don't see how anyone could be against it. Once the garbage gets in the river, it's so much harder to capture it.
Yeah, and along those lines, just so everyone is aware, and I don't know, I'm putting her on the spot, but we have Jenny Wendt, I believe, who is our plastic waste reduction manager, our campaign manager around that, Mayor. We have a great partnership with UN Environment, National Geographic, and University of Georgia, and now Rotary Club is also a collaborator in working to reduce plastic waste in the whole Mississippi River. Jenny, I'm totally putting you on the spot, I know, but if you're on, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I don't believe she's on, Colin. I can't see her info.
Oh, okay. She may not have been on. But just so you're aware, Mayor, we are engaged in an effort to basically turn all the citizens of the cities along the Mississippi River into citizen scientists. So everybody will be able to download an app onto their phone, and with that app, you can photograph waste along the river that you see washed up, and that will be uploaded into a mainframe and then turned into data on the type of waste, whose it belongs to, if the brand is still legible, and how much. And we can use that data then to basically create a citizen-driven brand audit of all of the waste along the Mississippi River in all 10 states. So we hope to have that we're going to try it out. We're going to try it out with Rotary and the University of Georgia, who developed it in later this month and in October. So we'll make sure to keep you closely apprised of that effort. But Rotary is holding a big cleanup the last week of September and the last week of October, and we're going to give it a run and see how it works.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Thanks for that update.
Absolutely. I think we have Mayor Carter's offices on the line. I can see them, but I think we're still standing by on Mayor Carter.
Colin, you want me to step in and we'll move to our next program, kind of step in for Mayor Carter? I can also, we could also recognize Mayor Dowse, who I know had some more information to share in regards to our efforts with Ms. McCollum. That'd be wonderful. Mayor Dowse?
Oh. He should be able to talk now.
Mayor Dowse?
Hi, can you hear me? I should be unmuted, right?
Yes. Hi, Sean. How are you, sir?
Great. How are you, Mayor Gallagher?
Very well.
Great.
I know you've been working real hard with Ms. McCollum and doing a lot of great stuff up in Minnesota. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate Representative McCollum's support for this Mississippi River initiative. I know she is really successful in initiatives she undertakes because she has been a very strong supporter of the arts in Minnesota as well as at the NEA and across the country. So the great success she's had in support of the arts will be replicated, I'm sure, with a success on the Mississippi River. And I just wanted to mention that Congresswoman Angie Craig, our representative here in Red Wing, I believe will be a really strong ally in this effort. In July of 2019, Representative Craig stood with the mayors of MRCTI to introduce the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund Act to complement the pre-disaster mitigation program and create a greater return on investment around making our infrastructure more adaptive to more frequent disasters. So I think programs like this will fold right into the great effort, the great initiative that Representative McCollum is going to be bringing forward.
Thank you. You're right. Ms. Craig has done a lot of good work, and I agree that together the tandem can hopefully help us with our partnership and move forward. Any other thoughts or questions from folks before?
Mayor Carter will be able to join us at 11 o'clock.
Okay, I saw that. I'll walk through kind of some information quickly, and then we will move because we've got an 11 o'clock, and it looks like people are getting ready for that 11 o'clock. I see Buzz Craft, so we'll be able to move forward to that. But just so you know, we've put together a proposal in conjunction with our work with Congresswoman McCollum. We have talked about disaster resilience grants. That's something we are, those of you on the call probably know a lot about, to support mitigation and adaptation projects that mostly rely on natural infrastructure deployments and restoration. We, as part of this same program, talk about outdoor recreation, parks, trails, and grants to help our cities connect to greenways, byways, and parks throughout the region to improve access to the river through and among all of our cities in the corridor. Consistent with our conversation this morning with the Walton Foundation, we look at the river system systematically as one, so that's important for all of us. We're working on errant nutrient reduction grants to assist state and local governments in the reduction of nutrient loading in the Mississippi River watershed through planning, zoning, and changes to government procurement standards on commodities, selecting for more sustainable production. Fourth, we're working on equity, environmental justice, and equal access provisions. And fifth, more resources to help us keep solid waste and plastic out of the river, as we just talked about with Mayor Lund and Mayor Dowse. I think it's going to take all of the mayors from the 10-state corridor up and down the river to make this happen, and we may have a small window at the start of the next Congress to ensure our corridor is represented well in the infrastructure package that is likely to be considered in the first 200 days upon the return of Congress in January. I also think it's going to take involvement from our 10 Mississippi River governors to make this happen. So we need to be working in conjunction with our governors. This effort has been compared to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and the Great Lakes Protection Fund. One thing both these programs have in common is the broad support of both have received from Great Lakes governors. So if we are to achieve something similar, we're going to need the governors with us. So we really appreciate Mayor Dowse's comments, and we look forward to Mayor Carter joining us around 11. We have a couple of minutes. Colin, do you have anything else you want to share before we move into our next presentation from Eric Letman, the Deputy Assistant Administrator for Mitigation at FEMA? Hi, Eric.
No, Mayor. We can actually move on to Mayor Kraft and Mr. Ledman. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Let's move down the river to Vidalia, Louisiana. Mayor Kraft, please take it from here, sir. How you doing, Buzz? I see you on there. *6 to unmute if you're on your phone.
Okay, can you hear me?
Here we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Good.
Good to hear your voice.
All right. All right, good. Thank you, Mayor Gallagher. I appreciate that so much, and appreciate you standing in for Mayor Carter. Good morning, everybody. This is Buzz Kraft. I'm the mayor of Vidalia, Louisiana. As far as location-wise, I'm right across the bridge from Natchez, Mississippi. For this final presentation, as part of our first session, we're going to stick with this theme of new visions for our corridor. I've actually been waiting since 2018 for the information we're about to receive. In the fall of 2018, Congress passed the Disaster Reform Act, which replaced the $260 million pre-disaster mitigation grant program with the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, which we all know is BRIC now. And it's set aside and made available $660 million. And here to discuss with us this new grant, how it works, and the application timeline is Eric Letman. He's the Deputy Assistant Administrator for Mitigation at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. And folks may recall that Eric presented us in Washington, D.C. this past March, and it was a very informative. And Eric, appreciate so much your willingness to deal with us on a personal level. I want to say that first and foremost. But the BRIC program is now ready to roll out, and the full guidance is available for mayors to view on the BRIC webpage. And this really could not come too soon as we continue to face these lasting impacts and costs from the 2019 record floods, the pandemic, and Mayor Broome, myself, and the rest of our Delta colleagues stare down the most active Atlantic hurricane season since 2005. Mr. Letman, thank you for joining us to discuss BRIC's final form and how we can build a credible application.
Mayor Kraft and Mr. Ledman, I apologize. We do have Mayor Pete on for his scheduled intervention as part of our standing order. We need to move to him. We'll come right back to you, Mr. Ledman. I appreciate the flexibility in this so much. I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Broome to bring on Mayor Pete. Mayor Broome?
Okay, I was having a little technical difficulty here. I apologize. I am so delighted, and we're especially honored to have Mayor Pete with us this morning, and we very much look forward to having him bring greetings on behalf of Vice President Biden. Mayor Pete, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and I so appreciate the chance to address you. And I'll be very concise because if I understood the chatter as I was coming online, I might be standing between you and some very important and useful federal information. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to share a word of greeting and convey the regard that Joe Biden and the Biden campaign have for the work that you do, and share just a little bit about the vision for infrastructure that there is. I want to acknowledge your co-chairs, Mayor Broome, somebody who is so admired and well regarded in the community of mayors. It's great seeing you, even if it has to be virtual this time. Thank you for your leadership. Mayor Gallagher, I want to make sure you know how much I enjoyed your community. In particular, one of my favorite places in America to fit in a run was on that Isle Parkway right around Leach Park, up and down the river through Bettendorf and in the area when we were there. And often on a very cold day, you always had it in nice order. So I appreciate the chance to be with you and with everybody on the call who lives and breathes these issues of infrastructure in particular, but not only mayors. I'm speaking to you as the mayor of a river city. St. Joe River is a little smaller than the Mississippi, but it's our river. I'm looking out the window at it right now. And I know how that river gave our community its life. I also remember how it felt watching that river rise to levels not seen before, and do that twice, with two 500 to 1,000-year flooding events occurring less than 2 years apart during my time as mayor of the city of South Bend. I know that there is even more on the shoulders of mayors today than there was when I left office a few months ago. And I'm so thankful for the work that you do when constituents have nowhere else to turn. They expect cities to get things done. And that's why I believe you deserve an administration that will put the needs of our communities first, and that is serious about infrastructure. Look, one of my favorite things about engaging with fellow local officials is that most of the time it's got nothing to do with politics, certainly nothing to do with party politics. Infrastructure shouldn't be partisan. But I also have to say, you know, the one area where the current administration had me fooled was that when they said there was going to be a major plan for infrastructure, I believed them because I thought it was good politics. No matter what party you came from, we could all agree on getting it done. The more we saw the plans that emerged, the more they reminded me of what the plan always is, which is for the locals to figure out most of it, and those federal officials we interact with heroically doing the best with not nearly enough funding to actually help us address our issues. Infrastructure is one of those things that residents count on to work well, and it only works well if people can take it for granted. But that's less and less possible right now. We're noticing our infrastructure a lot because of what's not going right. Roads and bridges crumbling in Wisconsin, schools in disrepair in Tennessee, water systems poisoning children in many of our communities here in the Midwest, flood protection systems failing, broadband networks that don't reach so many communities. And as we face these compounding crises from the pandemic to the wildfires, hurricanes bearing down on our coast, it's clearer and clearer that we've got to actually do something about it. Mayors understand that infrastructure is not a theoretical concept. It's life and death for the people that we serve. And as we said, it shouldn't be partisan. It is the difference between a thriving and growing community and one where people struggle to get by. And these are not new problems. I mean, our communities have been suffering from underinvestment and disinvestment for decades. So much so that the United States, the greatest country on earth, has fallen out of the ranks of the world's top countries by many measures of infrastructure. And for all the outlandish promises we saw in the campaign in 26, the self-professed builder who is now in the White House hasn't actually done anything on infrastructure. I can't wait for the day when Infrastructure Week rolls around and it's not a punchline, because I know how hard local officials, and by the way, career federal officials are working in order to try and make do with just not enough. And it's time that we hold our president to the same standard that every mayor is held to, where somebody calls you about anything from a pothole to a citywide crisis. We've got to have that level of accountability. And that's what I believe we have a chance to do this fall with a plan that doesn't tinker around the edges. And let me get into the weeds just for a minute or two about some of the things that the $1.2 trillion investment will actually do for us. It's about creating millions of good paying, often union jobs in construction, skilled trades, engineering, a solid income for constituents as we fend off a historic recession. It's going to go to improving the areas that our communities treasure the most and making sure our public housing is livable, making sure that our schools are inhabitable, that our air is breathable, and that our streets are walkable. It's going toward the knowledge that infrastructure today is digital, that we've got to have broadband for every household in America in order for kids to learn, for parents to work, to get healthcare, which is increasingly delivered at least partly through broadband, so that we can have a seamless integration of in-person care with doctors and the kind of telehealth that makes such a big difference. It's time for a 21st century power grid that can actually withstand the stresses from a changing climate and the risk of cyber attacks from our adversaries that we're not talking about nearly enough. It's about helping businesses take root in rural areas and small towns and connecting those communities to a modern economy to make sure no one's left behind. And this shouldn't be so far-fetched. This shouldn't feel pie in the sky, because America at its best has done exactly this. But right now, the U.S. is struggling on some of the basic measures of human development, confronting disease, fire, a reemergence of political violence, trying to get Washington to agree on how to have a functioning post office. How can we have 21st century infrastructure if under our current leadership we're litigating 19th century development concerns? It really is more than any time in my life, one way or the other, in my view. And I also think it's important to remember that Vice President Biden has the experience of doing this kind of work, because in 2009, President Obama asked him to step up and help save the economy from the Great Recession, which meant the implementation of the Recovery Act, which, as so many of us remember, was investment in roads and bridges and clean energy, the largest investment, as a matter of fact, in U.S. history. Now we're going to have to do something even bigger. And in the same way that that was run with less waste than any stimulus package in U.S. history, we've got to be ready to make sure that we not only put in the resources, but that we actually get out there and execute. And of course, local officials are the ones who are most held accountable for that. We got to make sure that there's a federal government that has your back. It's fashionable in this Washington, for some reason, to point fingers at local officials when things aren't going well. I miss the days when, as a mayor, I could get my calls returned very swiftly by an administration that cared about us. That's what I experienced with Joe Biden, and that's what you have to look forward to when we get this right. So again, I'm here, of course, bringing greetings and speaking on behalf of the campaign that I believe in, but I also know that this is a bipartisan group of people who just like to get stuff done. And how great would it be if we could once again concentrate our efforts on rolling up our sleeves and solving the actual problems that constituents are calling you about every day. That's what I see an opportunity to do. And even though the 2020s hasn't gotten off to a great start for America with all of the issues that we're confronting, we haven't yet reached the end of this first year of the 2020s. And I'm here with a lot of optimism and hope that we could look back on 2020 as the moment that we chose a new and better direction for this country. And if we get that right, then our communities will prosper through this decade in a way that will actually define positively a better American life in the years to come. That's what I think we could be doing. That's what I know you work on every day. And that's why you deserve someone in Washington who's going to have your back. So that's why I'm here. That's the word I wanted to share. And I appreciate being given the opportunity to say a few words to the old friends and new acquaintances that I see around the virtual room here. And I can't wait until it's safe for us to gather in person so that I can greet you at a closer distance. But in the meantime, thanks for the virtual visit, and thanks for everything that you do to look after those who count on you and trust you with their money and with their lives.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pete. To our members, let me just say that we provide equal time and opportunity for presidential campaigns to bring remarks. And I think Mayor Pete said something about our organization that is very true. and very representative of us is that we are a bipartisan organization that works together around the issues of the Mississippi. So thank you so much, Mayor Pete, for representing today the Biden-Harris presidential campaign. And let me just say, our partnership today for the comments and interaction around the Biden-Harris campaign has been with our sister organization, the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, which represents all the mayors along the Great Lakes on both the Canada and US sides. And so MRCTI joined forces with GLSCI this summer to push for the next stimulus package to include revenue replacement for cities. And GLSCI has been a fantastic partner that we hope to work with more closely. And so I'm honored to welcome the chair of the Great Lakes Mayors, Mike Vanderstein, the mayor of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Mayor?
Hello, and thank you very much for that introduction. Mayor Pete, it's great to have you join us. We're honored that you could make time to represent the Biden campaign and update us on some of the priorities that are very important to us. You as a former Midwestern mayor, you understand some of the problems that we're dealing with, and we really hope that you can take a little message back to the Vice President and urge him to also consider water equities and erosion issues in the platform that he can bring to our country. So again, thanks for being with us, and I appreciate your assistance in bringing those two issues up to the Vice President in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make sure to share that. It's close to my heart as well, and I know that it'll be taken seriously in this campaign and administration. Thanks again for the chance to be with you.
Same here.
Were there any other questions or comments? If not, Colin, we can go back to Mr. Letfin and Mayor Buzz Craft.
I think Mayor Carter is on, and had a comment or two. He was able to jump on.
Okay. Hello, Mayor Carter.
Good morning or good afternoon. How are you doing?
Great. Great to see you.
Well, it's great to see you all as well. I'm jumping from another press event, so I apologize. I appreciate your patience. I'm here with my newest young chief of staff here, who's working with me and advising me from home here. Mayor Pete, it's great to see you again. I appreciate the way that you represent mayors and show the world the extent to which, as you said, we don't have the privilege of kind of the partisan kind of gridlock because we have communities to run at the local level. I just appreciate the way that you represent that. And appreciate your comments today. I'm the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota. We have the distinction, the proud distinction of having more river frontage of Mississippi River than any American city. We take it very seriously that we have a responsibility to send you a healthy, thriving, clean river downstream to us. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to work alongside my Congress member, Betty McCollum, as well as Mayor Broome and all the other mayors kind of on this call to kind of lead this work forward. This work is really critical. Our Mississippi River is obviously one of our defining characteristics of our country. It's one of the defining characteristics of our city. Our ability to be good stewards of this river is critical to our future as a community. Our ability to utilize the river, maximize the river as the social, cultural, economic connector and catalyst that water has proven itself to be internationally is critical as well. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really appreciate is this notion that I just heard from Mayor Pete as well, that we can make 2020 sort of the pivot point for American history. We can make 2020 the pivot point for our communities, our cities around the country, where we chose a different, more sustainable path forward. As I hear the kind of conversation about how these types of resources exist for the Great Lakes and other bodies of water in our country, it seems well overdue that we put aside a dedicated resource to be good stewards, to ensure that we're passing our river and all the natural resources that exist within it and among it to our children and grandchildren in good shape. So thank you for all for being a part of this. I'm excited to be a part of this alongside you and look forward to just continuing to work alongside all of you as teammates as we invest in and along our Mississippi River. It is, there may be no thing, no item, no characteristics of our country that is the object of lore and storytelling in as much as our Mississippi River is. And so our ability to connect that river, not just the stories in St. Paul and the stories in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, but all the stories together, connect those all together and pass those on to our children in good shape. That's something that I think is as important as literally everything else that we're doing in the country. So thank you all for your leadership. I'm excited to be a part of this group.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Carter, and we appreciate your comments today, and certainly wish you and your community well as you continue to lead.
Thank you so much, Mayor Broome.
So now, Mayor Kraft, we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, I'm gonna defer back to Mr. Lettvin. I introduced him earlier, and we've had some good speakers since that time. Mr. Lettvin, I think it's now time for you to shine.
All right. Just for the sake of time, how much time do I have?
I would think, Colin, I would say at least what, 15, 30 minutes?
Correct. You can go right ahead, Mr. Levin. You have full time. We're on schedule.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk, I'm going to go very quickly through these slides and really hit the bottom line up front. And hopefully you all will appreciate that. And certainly we'll make these slides available because I anticipate that many of you would want to have a conversation with your public works director or emergency manager or floodplain administrator about what I'm about to present. So certainly we'll make this deck available, and it has all the resources and links when I get down to the bottom. So thank you again for having me. I spoke to you all back in March, actually right before things started shutting down when we were up on the Hill. And I talked about this new program, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, this pre-disaster hazard mitigation grant program. At the time, we were still building it. We didn't know what all the specifics were. We didn't know how much money we were going to have, and we had a rough timeline. Now, with clarity, I can share with you much more about the program than I was able to share back in March. So, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities grant program, again, supports our guiding principles of building a culture of preparedness, readying the nation for catastrophic damage, and reducing the complexity of FEMA. And we have a lot of guiding principles. This is a brand new pre-disaster mitigation grant program. So I shared with you this slide back in March that highlights the principles by which we were going to create this new grant program. Our priorities for the grant program: encourage public infrastructure projects, increase projects that mitigate risk to one or more lifelines. So when I say lifelines, the example I love to give, the lifelines construct at FEMA is really a lot of the power and water, sewer, energy, healthcare. Those are the lifelines. So if we have a project that mitigates one or more lifelines, that makes that project have a greater chance of making your community, your city or town more resilient. Promoting projects that incorporate nature-based solutions and incentivize the adoption and enforcement of building codes. That was in the legislation. So the timeline, and I'll talk a little bit more about this shortly, we were building this grant program after the passage of the new legislation. Back in the spring, we were doing training and rollout of the new program. We have since released our notice of funding opportunity in August, and in just a couple of weeks, we're going to open up the grant application period. which will close at the end of January. So this is a very good time for me to deliver this presentation to you so that you can get your projects ready to submit. The timing is actually perfect. So how much money was available? The amount of money that goes into BRIC is really a percentage of the amount of money that FEMA spends on individual and public assistance. All of the states and territories received a disaster declaration back in March for COVID, and those funds have helped put money into the BRIC piggy bank, is the analogy that I like to use. So we have $500 million that's available. That is probably about double the amount of money that we thought we were going to have in the program back in March when I spoke to you. I told you that we were looking to have 200 to maybe 250. We actually have $500 million, which is double the amount of money that has been in any pre-disaster mitigation grant program that FEMA has ever released. So the vast majority of the money is going into a competition, $446 million. $20 million is the tribal set aside, a separate pot of money. And then every state territory gets $600,000 right off the bat. So all they have to do is apply and they automatically get $600,000 for various activities. Now this is a very important slide for you all to understand. We get a lot of questions about this, and I was asked a lot of questions back in March. Who is eligible for BRIC funding? Local governments are eligible for BRIC funding. A lot of the cities and towns you all represent. However, by law, you have to go through the state. So if you have, what are the type of projects that BRIC funds? Flood control projects, stormwater management, acquisition and elevation of homes, those repetitive loss structures that are in the National Flood Insurance Program. Those are very popular type of grant applications. However, you need to apply through the state. It is typically your state emergency management office. So if you have a local emergency manager, they certainly have that relationship with, it's typically the state emergency management office. Sometimes it's a Homeland Security office, but your local emergency manager should have that relationship. The challenge is you also need to be talking with your public works director. You have a capital improvement plan. You have a lot of probably stormwater flood control related projects in your 5-year plan or what have you. Those are the type of projects that you want to be having a conversation with at the local level, and talk to your state emergency management director and understand how you could potentially apply for this pre-disaster mitigation grant funding. So you cannot apply directly to FEMA by law. You have to go through, you are a sub-applicant, you have to go through the state, which is the applicant. And that state will prioritize the projects within that state. So if you're in Minnesota or Mississippi, they're going to be receiving projects from all across the state, and they're going to be essentially racking and stacking and putting a priority on those projects and submitting them to FEMA. So you want to be having that conversation. The cost share. Again, generally FEMA pays 75% of the cost. It's 75 cents on the dollar. That goes a long way, but there's still a 25% cost match. Certainly in this environment of COVID and potential diminished revenues at the state and local level, we certainly understand that that is going to be a challenge. It always is. It's up to 90% for small and impoverished communities, and we will pay the management costs. For that cost share, we will recognize labor in-kind contributions. So if you want to demolish the structure and you want to submit an application, buy up that property and turn it into open space, and you're going to use your town equipment to demolish that structure, that actually will contribute towards that 25% cost share. So it doesn't necessarily need to be cash. I'm going to skip over this to, I already talked about, so our funding limits. One of the things that we did, we received a lot of input from our stakeholders. We wanted to up the project size. We previously had a cap much lower than $50 million. So you can submit a project up to $50 million. So we're looking to fund, projects that are going to have a positive impact on really reducing risk, reducing vulnerabilities in your community, and making your city more resilient. So that cap is now up to $50 million, which is a major change from the past. Now, want to talk about eligible activities. If you're not sure you have a project, you can apply for essentially funds to help you develop that project. If you need to do hydraulic, hire a local engineering firm to do hydrology and hydraulics and understand pre and post water elevations when you do a project, a culvert upgrade or a flood wall or stormwater management project, you can actually apply and we will, if you're successful, award you funds to actually go through and develop what that project will be. That's called project scoping. Building code activities, if you want to update your building code in your community, we can essentially pay for that. Thing over on the right, the projects must be cost effective. They must reduce or eliminate damage. And by law, whether or not your community adopts and enforce the latest two building codes, the project needs to conform with that. It also needs to align with your local hazard mitigation. The cost-effective one is the one that's very challenging. And we have a number of courses and we have software and webinars to help you with that cost-effectiveness methodology. But that's where we see a lot of projects get caught up. The project might be a good project, but it may not meet by law the statutory requirements that we have with the program. So this is new. I wasn't able to share with you the how we were going to score the projects. These next two slides essentially show you, and it's in our notice of funding opportunity, when a project comes in, how is our team going to have $446 million? How are we going to decide whether your project is funded or not? We're being very clear and very transparent as to what the criteria will be. I'm not going to go through all of these for the sake of time. But again, a point-based system, you'll see that a very big component in here is on building codes and mitigating lifelines and projects that have an infrastructure component to them. Projects that effectively achieve risk reduction and consider future risks like sea level rise or what have you, or future development or erosion. And the amount of population that's being impacted by that project. They're all things that are going to make a project more competitive. We are trying this. This is a new thing this year. We're going to be selecting up to 10 communities across the country for direct technical assistance if you really need a lot of help developing a project. And we're going to be taking nominees. I hope to do more than 10 next year. But if your community has never applied for a grant before and really needs some help understanding how to apply and understand if you have a project, we're going to come in and provide direct assistance to your community. And again, we're going to prioritize communities that haven't applied before for a FEMA grant over the last 5 years, have not received any awards, potentially are smaller impoverished communities or have demonstrated a compelling need. So how to apply? I'm going to try to end and answer your questions because I know there's going to be many. The application period will open in just a couple of weeks. And the application period closes at the end of January. So now is the time to be talking about what kind of projects you're going to submit. A little word of warning though, a lot of times the State Emergency Management Office will set a deadline for the state. So that might be January 5th, it might be December 15th. So the state has enough time to review all the applications and do their racking and stacking. So you definitely want to, so our deadline is the 29th for when the state hits send and pushes those applications over to us at FEMA. But you need to talk to your state emergency management office and understand what their process is and what their potential deadlines will be. So once those applications come in January, we typically, around the May timeframe, we will go through our process of determining which projects are going to be successful, and we'll make those announcements usually in the early summer, May or early June timeframe. We've had a tremendous amount of, we've had webinars and all kind of technical support. So I'm going to leave you with these, all these program support materials. You can give this to your local emergency manager, public works official. We have webinars that are recorded up on YouTube that really walk you through a lot of the questions, how to apply. If you have this kind of project, what are some of the things that you want to consider in your application? So we've done a ton of outreach over the last 3 or 4 months. We have much more available now to share than when I spoke with you back in March. So these are some of the links to those resources up on your webpage. And there's a way to sign up for updates in Gov Delivery. So hopefully I have kind of whet your appetite and gotten you excited about trying to apply for hazard mitigation grants that can help make your community more resilient. So I will stop there. I'll pull off the PowerPoint and open it up for questions. Mayor Kraft.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Letman. That's a lot of detail, and thank you for continuing to work with us in our region. We are going to have a few questions out there, and I would like to move into our question and answer period now. Remember to click the raise your hand button or use the chat function to share your question. And I can start us off, and one question I have is whether or not BRIC will allow multiple states to partner on one application. And since the river is a border for 8 states, multi-state engagement is essential many times for success for us.
Yeah, so I believe you submitted that comment 3 or 4 years ago, and we didn't previously have the ability to do that. We made that available, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. I don't think we've seen a lot of applications that have come in that are multi-state, but certainly it makes sense if you're on different states on different sides of the river. Yes, you are eligible. There's some logistics that we should probably talk about offline. You're going to have somebody take the lead. So if you're on one side of the river, someone's going to have to be the lead and submit it up to their state emergency management office. And then the folks that are on the other side of the river would have to, be part of that application. The answer is, without getting the bureaucratic red tape, yes, you can absolutely do that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Mayors that have questions, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand function if you can, and Brant will elevate you so that you can speak to Mr. Letman. And I can see from the chat there's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of stuff in the chat, so please do that so that he can find you and unmute you.
Colin, this is Mayor Evelyn from Grafton.
Yes, sir.
Can I go ahead and ask my question?
By all means.
Okay. Mayor Kraft, I'd like to ask this particular question. This is once again Rick Evelyn from Grafton, Illinois. And for those of you who do not know, we sit right at the confluence of the Mississippi and Illinois rivers. We're looking at a natural infrastructure projects next to my city that partners with MRCTI and Ducks Unlimited to allow about 1,000 acres of floodwater to infiltrate a confluence area between the Illinois and Mississippi rivers, and that exists basically 4 or 5 miles to our north. Okay, With that being said, these waters, rather than coming into my downtown area, would filter into this confluence, and that it would alleviate some of the flooding that we encounter most every spring. My question is, could all the cities on the Missouri and Illinois sides, could they benefit from this BRIC project and apply for BRIC funding? Thank you.
Yeah, so if I understand, I'm trying to understand this. So you're essentially trying to divert floodwaters and let it infiltrate into the soil. And I guess the project would be to reduce flood levels by doing that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, yeah, I'm a civil engineer, so I'm trying to understand this. So your post-project condition would be to lower floodwaters, correct?
That is also correct.
Yeah, so the benefit cost would be the reduction of those floodwaters. Who is going to benefit from that? It can be on both sides of the river, obviously. If the water level is decreased, whichever structures are going to have a lower flood elevation, those are, no matter where they are, those are structures should go into that application. And it doesn't matter if they're in one state or another state, they're benefiting from that particular project. So I think the answer to your question is yes. It's just a matter of who's benefiting from that lower water elevation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. And I'd like to also thank you. We just had FEMA leave our town about 2 weeks ago. We had representatives from DC finalizing our 2019 claims, and hopefully, you know, we're looking forward to some assistance in the future. But you know, to try to get things done via email and over the phone is one thing, and it's a very difficult thing. So when FEMA actually came here to visit our town, to sit with us for 4 days and to assist us in filing the paperwork to get into the portal was a big help to us. So I thank FEMA very much for that.
Thank you. I will certainly pass that on to our insurance folks.
Mayor Kraft, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
This is Bob Fox, Mayor of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Can the BRIC program be used to build back stronger from damage incurred from a previous disaster? Many of us along the river sustained tremendous damage from last year's flood. It'll be years before all of our infrastructure is repaired. Can we include that repair in the BRIC application?
Generally, yes. I mean, whether if the project is eligible in our post-disaster mitigation grant program, so typically if you have a disaster declaration, the same type of mitigation funds are available post-disaster. The same kinds of projects, we have one eligibility manual for the entire program. So if that project is eligible post-disaster, it is certainly going to be eligible pre-disaster. Without knowing what the specific project is, it's difficult, but we only have one set of criteria for both of our grant programs. So good mitigation is good mitigation. We hope to, one of the reasons why we have this program is to try to mitigate before an event occurs and not have to go through the suffering of a disaster declaration and that chaotic post-disaster environment. Like, let's fix these problems up front.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate all the information.
Are there any more questions? If there's not going to be any further questions, I want to thank Mr. Letman again for appearing with us today and answering all of our questions. One thing I would caution for all the mayors is to work closely with your states on this grant. Make sure you know when the state is setting its own deadlines to receiving applications. Mr. Letman, I'm not sure you're aware, but under PDM, states would place additional and onerous requirements on us to apply such as registering and to be allowed to submit an application at all. And these tactics were employed to limit the pool of applicants. So we need to be extra vigilant and communicative with our State Emergency Management Office regarding BRIC. Mayor Gallagher, I'm gonna hand it back to you, but first I would like to ask Colin if you would make available, since I didn't have this slide presentation, if you could email me his presentation, I sure would appreciate that, as would many other mayors along that's listening. So thank y'all so much. Mayor Gallagher, I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Presentation available We'll make it available to all those who are attending. So we'll work with FEMA to make sure we get Eric's slides. Thank you very much, Mr. Leppin, for your presentation. I also wanted to share with you that FEMA is very well represented by Adam Shapiro in your IGA office. He works very well with us, and he's always very responsive, and we're appreciative of his efforts. We want to work in close coordination with him, and he's always been there to advocate on our behalf. So thank you for that. We appreciate you.
Mayor Gallagher.
Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate Mayor Kraft's word of caution to work closely with state managers, emergency managers. That is no joke. Mr. Ledvin, states under PDM, they would require that we send letters weeks, and I mean like 4 weeks in advance of the deadline, which would, some of our cities had less than 7 days to get letters of intent to their states to open the door, and then they would only have a few days after that to submit a total application. So it really can get very difficult with these additional state requirements and other deadlines that are way beyond FEMA's. You guys, if we had your deadline, we'd be great. We'd be fine. But then the state sort of preempts that and gives us very few days to put together a complicated, large application. So that is something that really does hinder our ability to respond.
Yeah, and if I could, to address that, what we tried to do, we've heard that, we released our notice of funding opportunity actually back in August, and actually the application period is not even open yet. So we wanted to put out as soon as we could, hey, this is what this new program is. We've already done all of our trainings and webinars. Local governments, go ahead and get ready, even before the application period opens, so that you have as much time as possible, knowing that the states are going to put whatever internal deadlines that they have. So I think some of them are due towards the end of December. So we want to try to give you as much time as possible. The comment about capping the number of applications, one big change, I didn't mention this, we are not capping the number of applications at the state level. So the state may still do that because they have a limited number of staff and maybe they don't want to review a certain number of applications, but we, FEMA, are not restricting the number of applications that come in from the state. So hopefully the states are not going to be, capping the number of applications as well.
As far as I know, some states are already closing the door as of the end of this month for any more applicants. So we've got less than 2 weeks for some states.
Wow.
Colin, would Louisiana be in that, Colin?
That's kind of amazing considering we haven't even opened up the application period yet, but I can't control what a state emergency management office will do. But yeah, I just want to remind you that we have a ton of materials. We have webinars. They're only about an hour long. So there's a ton of stuff up on our webpage already released on this program.
Great. Mayor Baton, did you have anything you wanted to add or ask, or did you get what you needed?
I think all in all, it's good. The real issue that we run into so many times on these things are, as has been stated, the coordinating the state deadlines with the federal deadlines and that kind of thing. The larger issues that I've had questions about really relate to kind of like long-term planning as far as like what we're thinking about doing with regard to infrastructure. So we can talk about that maybe during the Q&A session.
Do we have anything else for? Again, Eric, thank you very much for joining us. This will conclude our first session of our virtual meeting. We will now break until 2 p.m. Central Time, at which point we will reconvene for session 2, entitled Partnerships to Build New Opportunities. We hope everyone can join us for this piece presided over by Mayor Strickland of Memphis, Tennessee, and Mayor Eastern of East St. Louis. Rotary International, and the United States Corps of Engineers will be making it. And we'll have an exciting announcement from the MRCTI Corporate Advisory Board. You can use the same credentials to sign on this afternoon as you used this morning. Same meeting and same ID number. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you back at 2:00 p.m. Central Time for our second session. Enjoy lunch.
Okay. We are at 2:02 p.m. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Colin Wellenkamp, MRCTI Executive Director. Thank you for joining us for session 2 of our virtual annual meeting. And with me, staff side, is Tiara Loomis on operations and Brant Thorington handling stage management. We're going to go right into our content for this afternoon, as we've got plenty of great stuff to offer the mayors. I'm going to recognize Mayor Strickland of Memphis, Tennessee, to get us started.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Mayor Strickland.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to session 2 of the virtual version of the 9th annual meeting of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, MRCTI. As Colin said, my name is Jim Strickland. I'm mayor of Memphis, Tennessee, and also the MRCTI chair for the state of Tennessee. Presiding over this meeting with me is Robert Eastern, the mayor of East St. Louis, Illinois, and you'll hear from him later. The title of our second session today is Partnerships to Build New Opportunities. So with this theme, we're going to hear from 3 critical stakeholders that either have existing partnerships taking on new developments or new partnerships that are just beginning to take shape. Our first speaker this afternoon is from a partnership that is still taking shape. At last year's annual meeting right here in Memphis, we announced a new collaboration with Rotary International and our cities along the Mississippi River. That collaboration has already paid off. Not only have Rotary clubs and MRCTI cities come closer together through great cooperation, but several MRCTI cities have won disaster recovery grants from Rotary to address the pandemic. MRCTI cities that have received Rotary disaster recovery grants in 2020 include Gutenberg, Illinois, Arnold, Missouri, and New Orleans, Louisiana. The city of Helena-West Helena, nearby Memphis, but it's in Arkansas, and their Rotary Club just collaborated with MRCTI to distribute PPE to a broad number of constituents from several sectors across their community. Further, Rotary joined the Mississippi River International COVID-19 Coalition. We are now working with Rotary to proof and validate a new plastic littering tracking and information app developed by the University of Georgia in partnership with the United Nations Environmental Program and National Geographic. Rotary International is a global network of 1.2 million members within over 35,000 clubs. One of Rotary's top missions is providing clean water. Considering the historic flood we've just sustained as the longest and largest in recorded history, our cities are going to need broad and innovative partnerships to help us meet our increasing infrastructure needs. Therefore, I'm very pleased to bring up Tom Thorfison, General Manager and Chief Strategic Officer for Rotary International. Tom graduated from St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, with a degree in mathematics and economics. He also got his law degree from Marquette University Law School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A Rotarian since 1980, Tom has served Rotary as a director and a foundation trustee and vice chair. As a side note, I was trying to put the timing on this. If you've been a Rotarian since 1980, I want to know if you were at Marquette in 1977 when they won the men's basketball NCAA championship. To begin our conversation this afternoon, please welcome Jill Petrinsky. I worked so hard on this. Petrinsky.
You're getting close.
I'm getting close. I'm sorry, Jill. But okay. Jill is a former Rotary governor and current coordinator for Zone 31, which includes Southern Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the Memphis region. Jill, I turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor Strickland. I'm Jill Petrozinski, and as the mayor mentioned, I'm an assistant coordinator for Zone 31 in Rotary International. And we really appreciate the opportunity to join with you again this year at your annual conference. As the mayor mentioned, Tom Thorfinson is the Chief Strategy Officer of Rotary International, and he actually started his leadership with Rotary as president of the Hopkins, Minnesota Rotary Club, and that was in 1992. The last 15 years, he's been actively involved in both raising money and helping develop projects and Rotary Foundation grant activity in the areas of water and sanitation. The Mississippi River is of great importance to Tom, both personally and professionally. He served as a member of the Rotary International Board of Directors from 2009 to 11 and as Rotary's vice president in 10 and 11. In 2015, Tom was actually selected to serve as a trustee of the Rotary Foundation. And in 2016, he was chosen to serve as its vice chair. But it was in 2016 that Tom stepped away from that role as trustee to accept the position he currently holds as Chief Strategy Officer of our organization. With over 30 years in private practice and corporate law in the greater Twin City areas of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, he's uniquely able to combine his legal expertise in corporate governance with his extensive volunteer experience to bring a fresh volunteer perspective to this position as Chief Strategy Officer for Rotary. So please join me in welcoming Tom Thorfinson as he shares the opportunity for our organizations to continue to work together. Tom?
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Mayor Strickland, Mayor Eastern. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group. I unfortunately started at Marquette just after they won the national championship. I did have the pleasure, Jim, of being in law school with two of the members of that championship team. I'm not sure if they were offering a guaranteed position in law school in return for their scholarship commitments at Marquette, but I guess in some way I played, so to speak, with a couple of those champions. So in any case, it's my pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to be sharing my screen with you, and I'm going to go through it relatively quickly in hopes that we have a chance to maybe interact with some questions and answers. So just a minute while we share. So I got to tell you, I grew up in Hopkins, Minnesota. My father and mother were longtime residents of Minnesota. My father, during World War II, served in the Navy and fell in love with boats. And as a result, when we were the children in the family, we were pleased to be able to spend our weekends on the summer on the cabin cruiser that my parents owned, that was kept at Prescott, Wisconsin. Most of the residents of Minnesota have cabins upon the lake, but there's a lot of people that enjoy the river. And so we were just up the stream from US Lock and Dam number 2. I know it from that personal experience, but at the same time, in that same time frame, my father was a vice president for Archer Daniel Milling Company, which is a company that uses the river to a very large extent, using the river to move the grains up and down the country. And I can remember as we headed off on vacation in 1965, that my father insisted that we take a little bit different route because there was a great flood at that time frame, and he was very much worried about the impact of that flooding on the ability of his company to move shipments of grain up and down the river. So I have lived close to where the river is. I've enjoyed it in many aspects, and so this is something that I'm very close to. And there's tremendous power in the river, not just from the economic perspective that I just mentioned, but also in the context of our communities and the impact on our communities, whether we're enjoying it, whether it's an economic impact, or whether it's just a feature that is part of our everyday life. And certainly the vast nature of this watershed district and its impact on global food supply is hard to imagine. But there's also another power that really is represented by all of us that are on this call as civic leaders. And I know many of you as mayors have come into the position not just from a perspective of wanting to hold some political position, but much more from a perspective of wanting to lead your community forward. And that's very similar with Rotary. We have an awful lot of civic leaders in our organization that bring to the table things like thought leadership, the ability to connect, the ability to advocate, and the ability to collaborate. And that's something that's tremendously valuable and something that all of us bring to the table. And I do have personally tremendous respect for those of you that are mayors. I ran for political office once upon a time. I ran for the school board in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I lost, and I got to tell you, I only lost by about 40 votes, and there were only about 350 people that voted for me. But after I lost, I must have had 600 people tell me they voted for me. So I know what you've experienced. The minute I lost that election, I knew that my career path had to be Rotary, because there are very few elections you have to win in Rotary. You just have to raise your hand and you're given an opportunity to lead. So I've had that pleasure. So. Of course, I want to talk about the power of Rotary. And Jim mentioned that we have 1.2 million Rotarians, but we also have 200,000 Rotaractors who are young adults between the ages of 18 and 30, and they bring a lot to the table. When we add the clubs that are Rotaract clubs to the Rotary clubs around the world, we have over 47,000 different clubs. We have a presence in 200 countries. In the United States alone, there's 7,600 Rotary clubs and almost 300,000 Rotarians alone, not even counting the Rotaract members. I suspect many of you are aware of our efforts to eradicate polio. I joined the Hopkins Rotary Club right out of law school at the age of 25. It was 1980. And it happened to be a year after we started our effort in Rotary to eradicate polio. So it started as a regional project. It started through money in the Philippines, contributed by the Rotary Foundation to help Philippine Rotarians to vaccinate children against the disease. It was an effort, first and foremost, by a group of local Rotarians within their country, within their region, seeking to make that part of their world a better world. And it has led to a corporate effort for over 35 years that we've undertaken. Rotarians to date have contributed over $1.7 billion towards the effort to eradicate polio. So this not only speaks to our financial ability to contribute, but it more importantly speaks to our ability to advocate for change and to drive that change forward. And that really speaks to civic leadership. And it is a drive that is a local leadership, and it is at the heart of what Rotarians are. So of course we have a corporate structure and a foundation, but I want to talk to some extent about the challenges that are in front of organizations that want to work with us. You have to understand that our foundation was developed to support the activities of Rotarians. It's based on what local Rotarians feel are the needs within their communities. And so much of what we do in terms of spending the foundation dollars is oriented towards supporting commitment and passion of local Rotarians to make a difference within their own communities. So we award in the range of $80 million a year to local clubs and Rotary districts to engage in local service in a meaningful way. And I will tell you, in the context of COVID, over the course of the last 3.5 months, we have awarded almost $30 million in grants to directly deal with the needs associated with that pandemic. And so we have acted and acted quickly. We've been able to be agile in shifting our focus towards immediate needs. And I couldn't be more proud of how we have reached into our pocketbooks, made a commitment, and moved things forward. And you have, as Mayor Jim indicated, seen some of the benefits of that in your own communities with some of the grants that are going on. And I will tell you, we talk about the amount of activity that Rotary does. And through the Rotary Foundation, we do somewhere in the range of $300 million a year in activity. About half of that goes to polio, and the rest goes to grants and different very specific programs that we've developed over the years. But recently we completed a study with the Harvard Research Group to analyze what is spent by clubs on a local level outside of our international foundation. And we discovered in that process that annually there's approximately $1.2 billion spent by clubs locally without ever going through our international foundation. So there's an awful lot of financial wherewithal to help in the context of local clubs. But that varies by clubs, it varies by the passion that Rotarians have. We are grassroots based. Very little of what we do moves forward without local Rotarians being interested and driven to make change happen. And so you will see very seldom top-down approaches from Rotary International. And that makes it difficult at times to form regional efforts, but it also assures that when we take something on, we're going to have local committed Rotarians prepared to really drive an initiative forward. So recently, and I suspect you might be aware of it, but maybe not, we have added the environment as a new area of focus of our foundation. This was approved by the trustees of the Rotary Foundation within the last 2 months. It will roll out officially with grants available on July 1 of next Rotary year. And I am pleased with this. It's very important from a strategic perspective in terms of the relevance of our organization. Our own Rotarians view the environment as top 4 in the world in terms of their priorities. But beyond that, our Rotaractors and the people we want to attract to Rotary, the young people, the people who are aware of Rotary and may be interested in joining, they put the environment as top of the importance, as the #1 cause that they want to engage in. And so it's tremendously important from our perspective in terms of relevance of the organization, but we anticipate that this will really drive our organization forward in terms of excitement and in terms of passion among our Rotarians. So as Jill may have indicated to you, we have put together a cleanup day, and the mayor mentioned this, and it's a pilot program using an app to track, and it is basically tracking environmental degradation around the river, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with regards to that. And we're hopeful of activating Rotarians to use this app and get things started. So, and I got to tell you, there's an awful lot of activity in Rotary that happens above the club level and below the international level that happens through our Rotary action groups. So Rotary action groups are groups of Rotarians that join forces based on a common passion for service. So we happen to have one that has been formed around the environment. It's called SRAG, Environmental Service, the Rotary Action Group. And it is a very active organization, and it is growing rapidly, particularly now that we've added this new area of focus for our foundation activities. So, and one of the things that we've been talking about, Greg Yank, of course, you may know, and Jill, working on a potential forum for 2021, Focus on Mississippi, a town hall meeting kind of approach that Rotary would coordinate. We coordinate activities like this across our clubs in the context of our World Polio Day, which is October 24th every year. And in the context of that, we see clubs engage in local activities on that date or close to that date. And we activate close to half of the clubs in the United States relative to World Polio Day. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity for us to build awareness at the local level among Rotarians about the river, about the needs, and about the opportunities for us to form a united front towards driving change to benefit the river. So I will say that I want to talk briefly about the grant activities, the types of grants that we have, and I'll cover them quickly. And then I think we'll have some time to maybe answer some questions for you. So we have at this point in time a number of grants that are utilized. We have district grants, which are relatively small amounts that are easy for clubs to access at the local level. And they provide small amounts to clubs to engage in activities in their own community. Very easy to get. They are a good starting point oftentimes for clubs to engage with the foundation and build on some skill sets, but also maybe open their eyes up to opportunities to extend beyond the district grant towards the global grant activities. Global grants are activities where clubs and districts can join forces and tap into the Rotary Foundation with matching funds. And those grants are very specific to the 7 areas of focus, with environment being one of them. So we also have the disaster recovery grants that were mentioned previously, which are easy to access, up to $25,000 in grant. Funds are available for each grant that's submitted. And it allows clubs to address immediate needs relative to a disaster with very few strings attached and very open in terms of requirements. So the grant activity that we've seen relative to the pandemic has been very significant. Over $6 million in disaster recovery grants were awarded over the course of the first 3 months following the pandemic. And they have varied from PPE to food supply, scarcity issues, to housing issues, even in the context of homeless in those situations arising due to loss of family members or whatever from it. So at Rotary International, we have an external engagement team that assists in forming partnerships, and I manage that team, and so I would be the first point of contact as we start to move forward more and more. I've been in discussions with Jill and Greg extensively relative to your efforts, and I personally am intrigued with the opportunities. I think that one of the things we want to make sure is to make Rotary relevant in the United States. And a cause that is significant for a significant portion of the United States is something that is really attractive to us. And it also is a cause, as I indicated, that could be very attractive to our members. So, and I think with that, I am going to open things up. And we have, of course, as a participant, past Director Greg Yank, past Director of Rotary International, who has been instrumental in working with Jill to help move things forward with your organization. So I would love to answer questions, take shots at me, whatever. I'm not running for office, so I'm not worried about what I might say from a political perspective. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Thorson. We're excited to continue working with you and your team, expanding your collaboration and building towards an official partnership. We move into questions from mayors and an audience as with this morning's session. If you wanted to ask a question, please use the chat function or click or raise your hand. The button can be recognized. You can get us started with Tom if you and the mayors have already done with the local club. If there's doesn't seem to be a bunch of interest in the club replies or the infrastructure now is what they do. What should the mayor do?
So I got to tell you, an awful lot of clubs want to serve, but they don't necessarily know where to go, what steps to take, what the needs are, and it's tremendously valuable for you to step in the door, to knock on the door of a Rotary Club and ask if you can't have the opportunity to speak to the club and talk about the needs of your community and talk about collaboration. Now, you may want to go down a path of very casual, reaching out to the club officer, the president, or a contact you have and start the discussion there. But for many of us in Rotary, we want to serve. Our interests, quite frankly, are community-based more than anything. And so to have a leader of the community come into a club and talk about needs within the community is a great start. And I know the needs are different, whether you're in the northern part of the river or the southern or the middle of the river. But oftentimes a lot of the things are things that are very important to those Rotarians because they're members of your own community. So I would start there, to be honest.
Okay, awesome. Are there any further questions?
I know Mr. Peterson had a question.
Yes, I'm Bruce Peterson, village of Port Byron, which is close to the Illinois Quad Cities, East Moline, Bettendorf, Davenport. My question in obtaining assistance from Rotary International, do we go through our local Rotary Club here? Is that the best format to follow, or can we come directly as a village to Rotary International?
So I will tell you, you can take both routes, but our foundation is internally focused. We award our grants specifically to clubs and districts to meet needs within their own community. So if you come to me, I will help you connect potentially with Rotarians. I can give you some sense of what works and what doesn't from a granting perspective, but it's very much dependent on your ability to convince local Rotarians that they should help meet the needs within your community. And so the best starting point is locally with a club, but oftentimes those clubs will have a desire to help, but won't be well-versed in maybe the grant process. And that's where it's helpful if you're reaching out to somebody like myself or Jill, but don't hesitate to come to us if you want further assistance to help open the door.
Okay. Well, I personally am a Rotarian, have been for 35 years, and our club is very active here. It's very small. We have only 40 members, but they're very active and they get involved with civic events. And my other question would be are you and Jill both based out of Chicago?
No, Jill is a volunteer, and so she served as a leader of a district and is now a regional coordinator for us to help stimulate Rotary activity across a larger region beyond her district. I personally was a Rotarian, still am, was a volunteer for 35 years, but what I did is about 4 years ago, I retired from the practice of law, and I'm now employed full-time. And in a virtual sense, I'm in Evanston, Illinois, although right now I'm broadcasting from my home in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You bet, Bruce. Other questions?
Well, seeing there's no more further questions, we can once again thank Tom and Jill for joining us today. Thank you. And we move to our next presentations for this segment. I'm going to recognize Mayor Tim Cobalt of La Crosse, Wisconsin, our presiding mayor over our Corporate Advisory Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Easton, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for our presentation here for the MRCTI Corporate Advisory Board. Every annual meeting, the Corporate Advisory Board leadership changes, with the vice chair automatically becoming the new chair and a new vice chair being seated. Today, I would like to recognize the new incoming chair of our Corporate Advisory Board, the American Queen Steamboat Company. And we are very fortunate today to have Shelley Hartfield of the American Queen Steamboat Company with us. The first and second largest river cruise vessels on the Mississippi River are operated by the American Queen Steamboat Company, and they were recognized in 2014 and 2015 as the world's top river cruise line. More importantly, the American Queen has stepped up to be the first private carrier of nutrient sensors for the Mississippi River, getting us closer than we have ever been before at a real-time nutrient monitoring net. Mayor Johnson, Mayor Smith, Mayor McClendon, and Mayor Stang joined Mayor Strickland on the American Queen last September, along with the USGS, the Army Corps, and the U.S. Maritime Administration for the launch of the sensors. So naturally, we are very excited that they are going to be our chair of the Corporate Advisory Board. So on behalf of MRCTI, please welcome Shelley Hartfield, Director of Product Development for the American Queen Steamboat Company. Shelley, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mayor Cabot. It's always a pleasure to see each of you, and while this year is different and not quite the beautiful location we had hoped to be in, I'm honored to participate in the MRCTI annual meeting. Mayors and fellow Corporate Advisory Board members, as a representative of American Queen Steamboat Company, I'm pleased to accept the role of Corporate Advisory Board Chair on behalf of our company. The communities along the Mississippi River are the lifeblood of our industry, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with each of you to give back to our river partners. Over the last few years, we have found ways to support our communities by goodwill, such as helping with the 2019 flood cleanup efforts in Grafton, contributions such as PPE during the COVID pandemic, and of course the economic impact in each community by bringing thousands of guests to each town. In addition, we rely on our vendors along the river for many of our products, hotels, maintenance, and services such as fuel vendors, Wilson Oil in Red Wing, Minnesota, and John Stone Oil in Gretna, Louisiana. Our hydration stations are from LK in Savannah, Illinois, and all of the local produce and provision vendors along the entire river. We thank you. As you and your communities know, the river cruise industry has been extremely hard hit by the COVID pandemic, by the restrictions and the federal government orders. As of yesterday, we have suspended the remainder of our 2020 season and look forward to resuming operations in January 2021. People are anxious to travel within the U.S., and we are excited to begin visiting communities as soon as it is feasible and safe to do so. We have been asked to identify our greatest challenges. Of course, having a vaccine is crucial for everyone, especially those in the hospitality, service, and tourism industries. The federal government's no-sail order that was meant to target large ocean-going, foreign-flagged cruise ships has been devastating to the small domestic U.S.-flagged river cruise industry and your communities that rely on the economic benefit of such. We have sent numerous letters to senators to ask for assistance through the CERTS Act that is geared toward transportation services. All other forms of domestic transportation have been allowed to continue without standard protocols in place, and some have even received some sort of government funding. Those include airlines, trains, and motor coaches. The only domestic transportation sector that has been shut down by the federal government is the river cruise industry. Yet, we as an industry have not received federal assistance. The one industry that was shut down completely is the one that has been overlooked. Federal assistance would help us continue to support our employees and their families during this difficult time. To end on a high note, we are excited to serve MRCTI as the Corporate Advisory Chair and look forward to seeing each of you along the river in 2021. We have one more exciting project in the works that we will discuss shortly. I also look forward to working with the mayors and our new co-chair over the next year. Mayor Cabot, thank you. Thank you to all of the mayors, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Shelley, and congratulations to American Queen for becoming our new corporate advisory chair. And I know on behalf of all of our communities, we look forward to having your votes back in our cities real soon. Next, I'm very excited to introduce Alexander Lokopoulos with Science Capital as our new corporate advisory board vice chair. Science was introduced to MRCTI by CDP North America, and Alexander came to our Capitol meeting in Washington, D.C. this past March, joined the corporate advisory board at our annual meeting last year, and has shown much ambition in working to bring opportunities to our association and our river corridor. He has introduced us to the Columbia University and over 160 Wall Street investors. And over the past several months, Alexander has also joined Science Water to our international COVID-19 coalition and contributed to our mask drive. So thank you, Alexander, for all of your help and consideration of MRCTI. And on behalf of all of the mayors, please help me to welcome Alexander Lokopoulos of Science Capital. Alexander?
Alex, you're muted.
Hi, that's never happened before. Well, thank you for that kind welcome, and great to see everybody here, even virtually. But I wanted to say, like Caryl Stern did earlier in the morning, she's a native New Yorker that fell in love with the Mississippi River. She was lucky enough that she's actually moved down there. I have fallen in love with the Mississippi River in many of the towns through some of the mayors here on the Zoom, but also having traveled there extensively. Unfortunately, I'm here in Midtown Manhattan right now. Would much rather be in Minnesota. I've been looking forward to that all summer, but so be it. The love of the Mississippi River still continues, certainly with me and with the rest of Science Water. And just a few words I wanted to talk about is we are a dedicated water infrastructure fund. And the reason for that is that we firmly believe that water is just such an essential part of the ecosystem that from the financial ecosystem to investment ecosystem that has been overlooked because it is so critical to, we just heard about tourism. There's the environmental aspects that we heard earlier this morning, the health, the job creation, the social justice. So because it affects so much, water is so critical, and I think not enough attention has been spent on it. In our approach, coming at it from the financial side is really helping fund the massive gap that exists. And we apply our network and our ability to do private funding, but also working with the various other constituents. And what I hope to work here with MRCTI is really helping fund that gap, however it is, whether it's through helping on the grant side, whether it's on the private side, public and private, but it's really helping put programs in place to get that funding in place for the various mayors. And as opposed to many of our other, New York City based or just general financial institutions, we believe that you need to start at the local level with the mayors and the hard work that everybody here is doing and will continue to do, because that's really going to drive it in terms of water infrastructure and helping fill that gap. And that's what we hope to achieve, certainly for the next year, but also for the many years to come, because the gap is so big. And I also will end that I think the current environment certainly has helped accelerate a lot of the understanding that water is a massive problem that needs to be fixed, but also it's accelerated, I think, the types of creative thinking, the types of technology, and the types of intellectual firepower that has come into the space. And we hope to bring a lot of that to bear to the benefit of the Mississippi River and all the mayors. So look forward to working with everybody and helping fill that funding gap so we can really make a difference, starting with water.
Thank you, Alex. And congratulations again on becoming the new vice chair for our corporate advisory board. To show everyone how valuable our partnerships with our corporate stakeholders can be, we have a special announcement today. In 2018, our mayors signed a historic agreement with the U.S. Geological Survey, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the U.S. Department of Transportation to deploy nutrient sensors on private vessels transecting the Mississippi River in their normal course of travel between New Orleans and St. Paul. And this has moved us closer than ever before to providing a real-time nutrient monitoring. And sorry, my dogs are barking in the background there. Closer than ever before to providing a real-time nutrient monitoring net. Last year in Memphis, those same agencies and the MRCTI launched the first private carried nutrient sensor aboard the American Queen, as we just mentioned a few minutes ago. Now, even in the midst of the pandemic, we are poised to expand on this work. And with more on that, I would like to recognize again Shelley Hartfield with the American Queen, and also Scott Morlock, Regional Director of the Mid-Continent Region for the U.S. Geological Survey. Shelley and Scott, take it away.
Thank you again, Mayor Cabot. As you said, in September 2019, American Queen Steamboat Company and the USGS launched the first private mobile super gauge nutrient sensor on U.S. rivers. This mobile super gauge was announced in Memphis, Tennessee during the MRCTI annual conference by our mayors, Jim Riley, the director of the USGS, and John Wagner, founder and CEO of American Queen Steamboat Company. The information provided by the super gauge will help preserve the health of the rivers and the communities that rely on them for generations to come. To continue being part of this cutting-edge project, we are proud to extend our partnership with the USGS by installing a second sensor, this time aboard the American Duchess. We look forward to the data that will be collected when she resumes service in January 2021. In the spirit of the pioneers who first explored and sailed these mighty rivers, we are excited to follow in their footsteps by being part of this trailblazing project. I would like to thank Tom Ruby with the USGS and Marvin Williams, American Queen Steamboat Company's port engineer, for working together to install the mobile super gauges aboard the American Queen and American Duchess. They have both shown determination, ingenuity, and collaboration to make this an extraordinary endeavor. Now I'd like to invite Scott Morlock, Regional Director of the USGS, to provide additional details.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Shelley, and thank you, Mayor Cabot. It's great to be participating today. Greetings to all the mayors, to Colin and his staff, and all of the distinguished guests today. And our director, Jim Riley, had hoped to participate today, but his travel schedule didn't allow it. So he sends his regrets. As Shelley mentioned, he was with you when we launched that first mobile gauge on the American Queen in Memphis, and our director remains keenly interested in this work. And in fact, he's asked me to keep him apprised of this effort as it continues to develop and expand. We too are really excited to be continuing our partnership with the American Steamboat Company to launch this second mobile super gauge on the American Duchess. Their support of this cutting edge effort, coupled with the existing USGS stream gauge network, enables us to gather that real-time water quality data on the river that will provide a better understanding of nutrient dynamics and other factors that may be affecting water quality in the river. Director Riley has discussed our vision of a 21st century science USGS, where we work with partners to find innovative and technologically advanced methods for collecting and providing data and science so that it can be used at the speed of decisions. Well, this effort aligns perfectly with that vision. To ensure the American Duchess Super Gauge is operational by the 2021 sailing date, a trip consisting of USGS personnel is planned to Louisiana to finalize equipment location and that installation while the vessel is docked. And of course, this will be done in a safe manner following USGS COVID-19 protocols and working closely with the American Queen staff. So once the American Duchess sets sail, that mobile super gauge data will be available in real time via the MRCTI Disaster Prediction and Assessment Portal. You can link to that portal through MRCTI's site. And then once the American Queen is sailing, that data will also be up and running, and it will be on the portal as it was last year. So data from both mobile super gauges will also be available on the USGS National Water Information System and the USGS Stream Gauge Network. So once again, my thanks, the thanks of all the USGS, Director Riley, to Shelley, and to all of the American Steamboat Company, also to MRCTI, to all the mayors for your support of USGS science to inform and enhance our understanding of factors affecting the Mississippi River water quality, and to work with you towards that healthier river system. So thanks again for the opportunity. Mayor Cabot, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Shelley. This really is fantastic news, and again, just a great indication of our partnerships with our corporate advisory board as well as with our federal partners, and to pull something like this together is phenomenal. So we do have time to open it up for questions, and again, just as a reminder, people can use either the chat feature or the pressing the raise your hand button to be recognized for a question from really for any of our speakers from this segment, if especially if they are interested in any more about the cruising industry's plan for sailing again into 2021. We have folks available. So anyone with a question, go ahead.
Mayor Cabot.
Go ahead, Colin.
Just so everyone can see, I can share my screen and show the portal that Scott is talking about and Shelley mentioned that actually carries the real-time data. Hopefully it will, hopefully it'll work. Let's see here. One second.
And if you're on your phone and you'd like to ask a question, please press *9.
So this is the front page of the MRCTI website, and you can hit Disaster Portal at the top navigation panel. And then once you enter the portal, it takes you to the various items that have been populated by various government agencies, including NASA, on all the different pieces of information that are now available, and the from stream gauges to flooding. And number 6 is the nutrient gauge on the American Queen that Scott talked about. And since, of course, the Queen is docked now due to the pandemic, you won't see it except for it won't see it running. But basically what would happen is the vessel would show up as a dot along the Mississippi River here, and all the places that the vessel goes in its normal line of business. And then down here would show you exactly what the sensor is stating. Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, Colin, I think that was a summary, and thanks for showing that. And we will also have the data that we've collected last year from the American Queen, and any subsequent data we collect. That will all be archived in USGS databases. And in fact, Tom Ruby is working right now to go through that data we collected from the Queen last summer, and checking that against our stream gauge network, doing a bunch of quality assurance checks, and really looking into what does the data and what do the trends mean in conjunction with our stream gauge network. So once again, we're just very excited, and we're looking forward, Shelley, to when these maps become live again. Thank you.
We are too.
It looks like we have a question in the chat. Are there any other USGS assets monitoring nutrients in the Mississippi River? What other measurements are on your wish list for ensuring a healthy river system?
That's great. That is a great question. We have quite a few assets in the Mississippi River watershed. So in addition to the super gauges that Shelley and I described, we have a network of fixed water quality sites where water quality is sampled both manually and with automated equipment. So an extensive network through the watershed. And so we are, again, I think the mobile super gauge really complements that fixed station monitoring. We're also doing quite a bit of ecosystem monitoring as well, biosurveillance. For example, since Mayor Cabot is on our Upper Mississippi Environmental Sciences Center up in La Crosse, does extensive monitoring as part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Upper Mississippi River Restoration Program and the long-term research monitoring element part of that program. So there's a lot of different data and information being collected by USGS as well as our partner agencies. So in terms of gaps, monitoring gaps, I think that's something we need to look at in the future. And we've been talking with Colin some about that, about how could we at USGS and also our other partners, federal partners, university partners, state partners that are collecting data, how can we look across the whole watershed and up and down the river to see what kind of gaps we might all have in the monitoring to inform the science for restoration. So that's kind of a high level view, but hopefully that's an answer to your question. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions for our panelists? Any others? Okay, I'm not hearing or seeing anyone with a raised hand or wishing to ask a question. So I am going to close out.
Mayor Cap.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Colin.
Got a question that was texted to me. I guess it's for Alex. Alex, what do you see as the major challenges for global capital going into 2021 vis-a-vis the pandemic?
Great question. Pretty broad. So, I mean, clearly it's a challenged environment in terms of stability. But having said that, what we are seeing is that there is a significant transition in movement of capital. There are many corporates, a lot of philanthropic capital, a lot of investment capital that has been sitting on the sidelines and is waiting to be deployed. And so what the challenge, I think, is for a lot of that capital, but also kind of what we need to address here collectively in terms of making investments in water is grabbing that capital in two ways. One is people are investors and general philanthropists are looking for impact and looking for things that are uncorrelated and more stable. And in our view, and the way that water and many of these projects that hopefully will be coming through MRCTI is they are extremely impactful and extremely kind of uncorrelated and stable. And when you're able to deliver both of those with some financial returns that are geared to what you're looking for, I think there is no better time to do that. So even though kind of it's a very unstable market and people are weary, I think the capital is there, and I think there is no better time to deploy that capital into impact and into things that are infrastructure related, fundamentally in the heartland of America. So kind of what we're hopeful for and what we hope to all do together is harness that momentum and harness that momentum for projects around the Mississippi River, because the macro trends certainly should be pointing in that direction. And what stops us from getting that is really simplicity and execution.
Thank you, Alex. We do have another question that's for Shelley, and maybe if mayors want to chime in as well. And the question really is, how can our cities and towns help the cruise industry recover once we do get back to travel in 2021?
I think as far as as far as American Queen Steamboat Company goes, anything that you can do right now to help us with the CERCS Act, talking to your senators would be greatly appreciated and would help us just as an industry right now in the interim before we begin sailing in 2021. In 2021, we want to partner with our ports. Our Vice President of Port Development, Gary Frommelt, is in contact regularly with each of the ports. And, if you have any concerns when we get ready to ramp back up, please let us know. We do have an extensive COVID plan in place that can be found on our website, so you can go there and look at that. And then I think it's just making sure that when we start back up, we have that communication and let the communities know that when we are coming back, we're coming back in a safe manner. And hopefully at that time, January 18th, when the American Duchess begins to sail, things will be lifted slightly. I can tell you that the American Duchess, being the first one of our river cruise boats back out, is the one with the lowest passenger capacity. So we will be way under any restrictions or anything that are currently in place. So just your support at this time with the senators would be fantastic for that CERCS Act. And beyond that, we just look forward to seeing each of you again in 2021.
Thank you, Shelley. Any of the mayors want to chime in on that as far as what their cities might be doing? I know in La Crosse, we're working on some port improvements over the winter in anticipation, obviously, of river travel again. And I know our staff has been in contact with American Queen and others on that. So we do look forward to river cruises coming back again. But anyone else with a comment, or I would open it back up for other questions?
I think former Mayor Klipsch raised his hand.
Mayor, go ahead.
Hi, Mayor Cabot, good to see you. I just want to echo Shelley's comments. With the American Cruise Line, we are also suspending our cruises till early next year as well. And some of the same challenges that they are facing, we are facing as well. We want to thank all the port cities for their cooperation. And we look forward, as was with the American Queen, we put very stringent processes in place to protect people and the citizens in your communities. Similarly, we also struggle with some of the federal guidelines related to that. And as Shelley very eloquently provided the information related to that. So we're growing rapidly. The American Cruise Line just added one new boat and has another one in the shipyard. It's going to increase our work for all of us on the Mississippi River, and we're looking forward, where I know we're talking with the people in La Crosse, but in many of the cities, about how we can bring more activity into your communities. But it's a challenge, and we as a cruise industry are focused on safety, but also on bringing more economic development and passengers to your city. So Shelley, congratulations to you and American Queen Steamboat Company for your role with the executive board and the corporate board. And we want to thank you for that, but also thank all the mayors. We're looking forward to, and I've been in touch with many of you. We're ready to come back as soon as possible, and we're looking forward to being in your cities as soon as possible as well. And one other last thing, we are all also interested as the American Cruise Lines to put monitoring devices on our ships as well. So I had an initial discussion with Colin and our leadership. So we'll be talking more about that, and maybe we can join that important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone else with a comment or a question that they'd like to share?
I think Mayor Stang would also like to say something.
Mayor Stang, go ahead.
Yes, here I am. What I would like to say in this particular point is to number one, just since Frank stuck his nose in there, I'd like to say hello to Frank and also to Shelley. I would like to encourage all the mayors, and Colin, I think we need to get together and put together some kind of some documentation to address the senators on this very important issue. The other point I'd like to make to both of those people is within the next 3 weeks, Little Kimmswick will be breaking ground on its port. So hopefully when you guys get ready to go, we'll be getting close to being able to accept your boats.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a question or comment they'd like to share? Colin or Brant, any more texts coming your way for questions? Let's see.
Yes, we do, actually.
I do see one coming through the chat line that does say, how can local elected officials get involved if our mayors aren't particularly interested in the river? And that's a hard one for me to answer because I'm very interested in the river. So I think the mayors are really elected to reflect the values and priorities of the community, and community members can do a lot to talk to mayors and talk to their city councils and village boards to get people motivated. So that would be one suggestion that I would have, but I don't know if others have thoughts about that.
We've actually run into that before, and it's just a matter of sort of getting a moment with the mayor to introduce how the priorities can align, and sometimes it's just hard to cut through the noise. You know, the life of a mayor, you're pulled in a million directions, as you know, Mayor Cabot, and you just got to find that moment. But sometimes just as important as the moment is the person brokering the moment. It needs to be a person of mutual trust that the mayor really listens to and respects. That's not us, but that's someone close to the mayor, and who really wants the conversation to happen. It might just be that the mayor is just torn to other priorities and needs someone that he or she really, really trusts a lot and respects to set the table for the conversation to happen. 99 times out of 100, once the conversation does happen and it's brokered correctly, it works. It really does work. It's just a matter of doing that. So we're of course open to it and can work to facilitate that as much as possible.
Thank you, Colin. We did receive another comment, question, urging on the chat line, talking about at the citizen level about honoring the river and helping the river cruise industry. The couple of suggestions here would be obviously to purchase cruise packages for 2021, and I'm sure Shelley and Mayor Klipsch and others can help out with that, but to purchase those cruise packages, but then also the connection to our youth and getting our youth excited about the science on the river as far as the nutrients and the monitoring of the health of the river, as well as dealing with plastics and trying to do the river cleanup. So those are some other suggestions here on the chat that folks are encouraging. And I don't know, Colin, if you want to touch on that or if anybody wants to touch on that, but I think those are all very good suggestions.
They certainly are. Yeah. And I know USGS has a great record of involving youth and students in their work. As does one of our partners with the plastics effort, National Geographic. They've got a whole youth focus. There's actually also an organization that works to get youth interested in the Mississippi River, well, all U.S. waterways and all the jobs that occur on them. And that's called RiverWorks Discovery. I believe RiverWorks Discovery, I want to say they changed their headquarters place. I'm not sure where they're based now. It might be Dubuque, but their whole mission in life is to orientate youth to all the opportunities on U.S. waterways, and both science, environmental, to engineering and navigation, everything that you see and that folks depend on. So that's another, and we've partnered with them in the past. So that's another possible outlet.
Thank you. Scott, did you want to address that at all as far as the connections with the science and the, you know, what USGS does? I wanted to give you an opportunity in case you wanted to chime in.
I'm sorry, Mayor Cabot, could you repeat that question? I had a momentary phone call there.
No worries. We're all getting really good at juggling the various technologies, aren't we? The suggestion really was as far as encouraging our youth and getting that next generation to get excited about the river, especially with the mobile monitors now that are being deployed on the steamboats, but then also the current network, the more permanent sites, and just what does USGS or if you can maybe just briefly touch on that connection to the school age and the youth groups to get people excited about science and the river.
Absolutely, Mayor Cabot. Yes, that's something we do. We have quite a few programs and efforts aimed at getting youth interested in science and USGS, a whole number of programs. So that is something we can definitely do in conjunction with efforts like what we're doing with the mobile super gauges and others along the river. So I'm glad you asked. I will work with my staff and the rest of our executive leadership team to see how we might align those programs that we have with interest in science and interest in the river. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments that folks would like to share for this afternoon? Anyone else? I'm getting a text here while I'm trying to, let's see. Okay. Well, we are ready to move on. Before we do, I would like to just close out this part of the Corporate Advisory Board and our meeting related to our new leadership with the Corporate Advisory Board. But before we close, I would like to just acknowledge those companies that joined our COVID-19 International Coalition and contributed to our mask fund or donated PPE directly. And on behalf of all the mayors, I'd like to thank the following companies: Climate Nexus, Yum Brand Foods, JF Brennan, SCF Marine, Columbia Water Center of Columbia University, Viking River Cruises, Munich RE, Science Water, CDP North America, Secor Holdings, Tetra Tech, and the U.S. Heartland China Association. And just real quick, a particular note of gratitude goes to the U.S. Heartland China Association, and thanks to the work of Mayor Stang of Kimmswick and former Missouri Governor Bob Holden, MRCTI was able to secure thousands of units of PPE from Guardians of the Angels Charitable Foundation and the Chinese People Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries. And we really appreciate that effort. I do understand that Colonel Jensen is ready to go, so I will turn it back over to Colin for our next part of the program. Thank you.
Sure, Mayor, no problem. Mayor Stang, did you want to add anything to Mayor Cabot's gratitude to Governor Holden's organization? Take that as maybe not right now. You might be off. Okay.
Wait a minute. I'm back.
Okay. No problem.
All right. It took me a minute to find out how to unmute myself again. Anyway, I'd just like to make just a couple of comments because I think that, you know, all of the PPE that's been donated by all these companies and by especially through, as I periodically harass Governor Holden, what a great job that he's done with the U.S. Heartland China Association. I keep trying to get him to come back to Missouri and be the governor again. We really need him. But my comment would be to kind of personalize this, because we did send quite a number of units of PPE to all the cities up and down the river. But from a very personal perspective, city of Kimmswick is a very small city. And the city of Kimmswick was heavily impacted last year by the floods, to the point where we exhausted our reserve funds. And we were not reimbursed because apparently we did too good a job of saving ourselves, so we didn't have enough damage. Following that, we had to figure out a plan for this year for flooding, and also to start coping with COVID-19. Having looked pretty much all over the United States, and all as an old purchasing guy, using every avenue I could find and think of, we could find some PPE, but it was very expensive and we just don't have that money. And even now, as we get funds that come back and say, if you spend money, we will reimburse you. Well, we don't have any money to spend in the first place. So I would like to just add my thanks across the board, because without the donations that we got to the city, we would not be able to have protected our employees, protect our shop owners, and also be in preparation for any flooding. Of course, now we have to plan for a drought, but that's something different. So anyway, thanks everybody very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would add to that American Queen Steamboat Company donated over 5,000 masks themselves to our mask fund. Even given everything that they were going through as a company, they still found a way to give us several thousand masks. So thank you, Shelley, and your work in that regard. To hand it over to Colonel Jansen, I'm going to give the floor to Mayor Eastern and Mayor Dowse. And thank you, Colonel Jansen. Mayor Eastern. Mayor Eastern, are you there?
Looks like he's signed off, Colin.
Okay.
Oh, never mind. He came back in. He's right here.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mayor Stang and Mayor Calvert, for their new Corporate Advisory Board leadership. We're now going to move to our final piece of this afternoon sessions. And for that, we'll be handing things over to Mayor Sharon Dawes of Red Wing, Minnesota, who is our Minnesota chair. Mayor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor Eastern. Good afternoon, everyone. Without our partnership with the Corps over the past 7 years, we would not have made it this far in our effort for the Mississippi River. But now our relationship is more important than ever, and I think the Corps agrees with that sentiment. Our Corps chairs had a conversation with the new commander of the Mississippi Valley Division, Major General Diana Holland, earlier this month to discuss MRCTI priorities and moving our partnership into 2021. Mayor Gallagher or Mayor Broome, did you want to comment on that conversation?
Mayor Dowse, I'm good. I think you've got it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that it was certainly a good introductory conversation, and I look forward, and I know she does as well, to us continuing to build a relationship with the Corps. So,
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayors. MRCTI has a memorandum of common purpose with the Corps of Engineers that we executed in 2013. We've tried to work closely and in persistent coordination with the Corps. Here in the St. Paul District, our partnership with the Corps is strong. Right down here on Red Wing, consistent high water last year continuously fought two major construction projects here in Red Wing. The building of a new bridge across the Mississippi River to Wisconsin, and the renovation of our levee park to prepare first-class dockage to accommodate riverboat cruise lines. The Corps worked closely with our construction teams to make sure that these critical infrastructure improvements could make progress or recover from damage. I have to say that last year was a real test for us. From my city to major Cantrell of New Orleans, the vast majority of our cities were impacted, some of us losing upwards of 80% of our economy. According to NOAA, the total tally of costs for the 2019 floods across the Mississippi River Basin was $20 billion, over $6 billion for just our 10-state corridor. As mayors, we see a significant part of the solution to these impacts is the deployment and reestablishment of more natural infrastructure, such as wetlands, marshes, and reconnected floodplain. MRCTI is working diligently in that direction. To that end, one of our standing priorities with the Corps is to increase our participation with the Corps in the development of Mississippi River management plans. In fact, St. Paul District Commander Colonel Carl Jansen is here to share details of the new Upper Mississippi River Management Plan developed in his district of MVD. Colonel Jansen, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks very much, Mayor. And Colin, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Mayor.
Yes, sir, we can. Go right ahead.
Hey, great. Hey, thanks again, Mayor Dowse, and great to see you in Red Wing, which is just a beautiful reach of the river. I love visiting your city. It's just phenomenal down there. And so I'm gonna just briefly share my screen. All right, and Colin, are you seeing it on your end?
We have it.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hey, fantastic. So, yeah, hello from St. Paul, Minnesota. On behalf of Lieutenant General Scott Spellman, he's the new Chief of Engineers, and as you mentioned earlier, Major General Diana Holland, our new Commanding General of the Mississippi Valley Division. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to engage with you today. The St. Paul District, along with the Rock Island District and the St. Louis District, are extraordinarily proud to serve the people in the watersheds of the Upper Mississippi River. We recognize its unique beauty, its vitality, and its utility, and the fact that humans have gravitated towards this great river for over 12,000 years. Amazing. In many ways, I think the river has defined our nation, and it's in line with everything that we've heard today. We take our stewardship responsibility very seriously, and we're inspired by the type of work that we do for the benefit of the environment and our fellow citizens. And most importantly, I think we recognize that we can do nothing alone. We deeply value the partnerships and diverse perspectives that ultimately lead towards the best outcomes. All right, so on to the next slide. I will talk about the Upper Mississippi River Master Plan, but I think there are some other activities ongoing that you should really know about, and it fits into that broader vision that Mayor Dowse talked about. So our first ongoing effort is that Upper Mississippi River Master Plan. This plan was updated in 1988. It was supplemented in 2011 with a land use allocation plan. So we can recognize that it's very dated. You know, since then, there have been many changes in the environment, outdoor recreation, in addition to Corps of Engineer policy. So we got this effort started. We held an initial comment period last summer. We spent the year preparing the update in concert with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as our tribal representatives. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of Natural Resources from the adjoining states were critical to this effort. The draft plan was released for public comment just last month, and that public comment period actually ends tomorrow. Now, the scope of this master plan is a little narrower than the name implies. It's not a watershed plan. Rather, it relates to St. Paul District's Mississippi River project, and specifically the 52,000 acres of land that we own adjacent to the 240 miles of the Federal Navigation Channel that we maintain. The Rock Island District and the St. Louis District also developed similar plans for their areas of responsibility. Our plan's essentially a strategic land use and recreation management document, and it guides our approaches over the next 25 to 30 years. It's intended to establish a clear, practical, and balanced approach to guide future environmental stewardship and public use development actions on our lands. It does not address technical aspects of water level management, water quality, shoreline management, or operation and maintenance of the lock and dam system, which are very important to all of our stakeholders. But we have other activities that address those issues. That's the master plan in a nutshell. I think I really want to save some time to talk about some things that might have a more significant and longer term impact for the region. All right, so next is our dredge material management plans. So aside from maintaining our locks and dams that were constructed in the 1930s, the maintenance of the 9-foot navigation channel is a major ongoing effort. And recent trends that Mayor Dow's talked about have made this job more difficult. Greater precipitation leads to greater runoff, higher water levels and increased bank erosion, and all of this leads to greater amounts of sedimentation. So in the St. Paul district, we dredge approximately 1 million cubic yards of sand each year to keep the channel open for safe and efficient navigation. And it requires about $20 million to do so. In this part of the river, we manage all of the sediment in upland areas versus in-water approaches that some of our sister districts downstream utilize. And this sets up some special challenges in finding space to handle so much sand. And sometimes you see this in the news. We use dredge material management plans to identify and implement long-term, decades-long strategies for this purpose. We currently completed plans in pools 2 and 5, and we're working on plans in pools 4, 6, 9, and 10. This is a big effort for the district. But because we dredge clean sand versus contaminated silt, I like to approach channel maintenance more of an opportunity than a challenge. Much of the sand we've historically dredged has gone on to fulfill beneficial uses, and this will be a major focus for our district into the next century of the 9-foot navigation channel. When you think about it a little bit differently, you can recognize that we're a major regional producer of a useful resource that we can offer for free. So we're looking at new creative ways of connecting our resource to the market, and that's one of the areas I think we can use the most help from external groups who have a lot of business acumen. Shifting over to the Upper Mississippi Restoration Program, we're enormously proud of our involvement with this. The vision of this program is a healthier and more resilient Upper Mississippi River ecosystem that sustains the river's multiple uses. The CORS program is centrally managed out of the Rock Island District, and all 3 of the Upper Mississippi districts work very well together, along with a diverse body of partners and stakeholders to identify, prioritize, design, construct, and then maintain habitat restoration projects. The program was authorized back in the Water Resources Development Act of 1986, and it was the first restoration and monitoring program undertaken on a large river system in the U.S. It's been a very successful engine for habitat restoration projects, and it's delivered decisive results. The engine's fueled by congressional leadership and appropriations. $33 million this fiscal year, and about $637 million since the program's inception. It really is a good news story. 56 projects have been completed. We've got 11 projects underway and another 11 in the planning stage getting ready. Many of these projects have been able to use dredge material from the navigation channel as a construction material in these projects, and that's just a double bonus. And so we learn more and more with each one of these projects, and we apply those lessons learned and other state-of-the-science knowledge to plan and construct high-performing, resilient projects. And lastly, on this slide is a planning assistance to state study. This is much more forward-looking than probably the other 3 items I talked about. And we do this in partnership with the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association. This association is very well known, but if you're fairly new to the MRCTI, this organization represents the governor's offices of the 5 Upper Mississippi River states. Last summer, the UMRBA engaged with a broad range of diverse stakeholders throughout the basin during numerous listening sessions. These sessions clarified common concerns regarding flood risk, increased sedimentation, and the future likelihood of extended drought. The Corps and UMRBA moved forward with a one-year study last fall to establish a common watershed vision and identify opportunities for long-term sustainable solutions that support economic, community, and ecological resilience. Like the UMRR, Rock Island District is the lead district for this study, but in concert with the St. Paul and St. Louis districts. The study resulted in a draft report. It's titled Keys to the River 2020. This report will be released for a public comment period this fall, and a final report will follow soon after. So I hope everyone looks for that, and I'm sure we'll be doing a public rollout of that. The really important thing to know, I think, is that this study could help inform the development of even a much more visionary and comprehensive watershed study, and I'll talk about that in a minute. All right, moving on to two future efforts. I'll discuss NEST and the Section 729 watershed study that I just alluded to. As the name implies, the Navigation and Ecosystem Sustainability Program has a balanced, dual commercial and environmental focus. In 1986, Congress declared the Upper Mississippi River System a nationally significant ecosystem, especially in terms of the fish species and the migratory birds, and a nationally significant navigation system. 60% of America's corn and soybeans are transported on these waters, as you know, and this is a tremendous global competitive advantage. It underpins our economy, and that's a strong national security connection. I think that's why the Army is involved with this type of work. NESP originated in the early 1990s. It was restructured in 2001, completed in 2004, and authorized in 2007. The program revolves around small-scale navigation efficiency projects, new 1,200-foot locks in some locations, and a range of ecosystem restoration, fish passage, and environmental pool management. The Corps received $1 million in funding in 2018, and we used that to update the economic analysis, which is still underway. The Corps received another $4.5 million in fiscal year 2020 through the Corps' work plan. This was great news. We've been very busy this year with pre-construction engineering and design efforts for both navigation and ecosystem restoration projects. The goal is to have these projects ready in terms of both designs and staff capabilities within the Corps and among our partners so that we can be ready for future construction funding. And finally, and perhaps most significant of all, is a future potential comprehensive watershed study, again in partnership with the UMRBA per Section 729 of WRDA 86. Section 729 is a unique authority. It enables the Corps and partners to evaluate a series of strategies, alternatives, and actions within a watershed context and across a broad range of stakeholders' interests. In other words, at a very large scale. This type of study enables planners to be truly visionary. A 729 study would facilitate developing a holistic watershed assessment to support a shared vision and then an associated watershed strategy. The Corps and partners can then rely on this strategy to identify and justify future potential studies and projects that could be pursued under other authorities, but all serving a shared purpose with a unity of effort. And I think that's what makes it special. Nationally, Section 729 studies are very hard to come by, and the UMRBA continues to champion this effort with their relationships. Should Congress authorize a study in the future, the public assistance to state study that I spoke about earlier will serve as a critical input to help with the scoping effort. And another building block for the study is a sophisticated large-scale hydraulic model, and that's represented by the green bullseye on the slide. This modeling effort is already underway in a phased effort in coordination with state and federal partners, and it's funded through our Floodplain Management Services Program, FPMS. It'll serve as a standardized and seamless flood risk management tool spanning Minneapolis downstream to Thebes, Illinois. So it really is a unique effort. So just to sum up, those are a few of our many ongoing efforts. I think it was important to raise some of these to your attention beyond just the management plan for the land that we own. And again, I can't emphasize enough that we can't accomplish our public service mission without the strong relationships and partners that we enjoy in this region. We're always here for your direct access and always available to visit you in your towns and cities, engage with your elected leaders. And I just appreciate this opportunity and certainly happy to address any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Colonel Jansen. We can move this to our Q&A now. Once again, a last reminder that to ask a question, you can click that raise hand button or use the chat option. Any questions or discussion around what Colonel Jansen had just presented on? I know I have a question. Colonel Jansen, to us mayors, it is critical that the Mississippi River management plans be informed and contributed to by the entire corridor. Since our system is so interconnected, and what I do here in Minnesota directly impacts my colleagues in Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Tennessee, and on down to Mayor Constant in Gretna, Louisiana. To that end, are these plans developed through a coordinated process that involves all the other districts of MVD?
They do, and I'll say, Mayor, our planning community is in Mississippi Valley Division is very special. In fact, it's regionalized. The Mississippi Valley Division divides our planning community in half, with the Regional Planning and Environmental Division North and the Regional Planning and Environmental Division South. And it's RPED North and RPED South for short. RPED North is based out of St. Paul District, and we have planners that are forward stationed in both the Rock Island District and the St. Louis District, but it's under one planning entity. And so that just builds in from the start the collaboration and integration of all three districts into this effort. I think that results in some consistency and unity of effort with a multitude of interests.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Mayor Dowse, thank you so much for raising that. This is Mayor Belinda Constant. If I could, I do have a question of the Colonel. Actually, I want to say, Colonel Jansen, thank you first so much for being with us and giving of your time today. I am Belinda Constant. I am Mayor of Gretna, Louisiana. As Mayor Dowse just said, Gretna, Louisiana is a mid-sized city right across the Mississippi River from New Orleans. And my question would be, is there any possibility of us working out a way to get you and my district's commander, Colonel Murphy, into an organized discussion about, actually along with other commanders such as Rock Island and St. Louis and Memphis and the other districts of the Mississippi Valley Division? And that point is because I would love to see a more collaborative relationship or collective relationship with all of the commanders, including us. And this would be especially valuable since the flood control strategies implemented in one district drastically impact those cities nearby, possibly in another district. Colonel Jansen.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Really nice to meet you, and I think that's a wonderful idea. I don't see anything getting in our way of doing something like that. I'll tell you, the 6 districts in the Mississippi Valley Division do work very well together. Just the commanders, we're a tight-knit group. We collaborate all the time on a variety of issues. We would be happy to explore this further and how we can do that. And I'll also say our senior civilians who work with us, we call them deputy district engineers. They're really the continuity of our districts too. And I think together as a team, we can approach this and look for those opportunities to have a more unified appearance with you.
Thank you so much. I think that would be helpful, especially since we've spent a lot of time today talking about the concerns of upper Miss versus lower Miss. And, you know, with us in heightened hurricane season, it's been pretty active. And so, you know, all of these discussions taking place would be so beneficial if we had representatives all in one room talking about challenges and ways forward to meet those challenges. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being amenable
great.
to that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Not seeing anything on the chat.
I think we're good, Mayor Dowse.
Okay, thank you. Well, at this point, I will thank Colonel Jansen again for being with us. Thank you, Colonel. And when next you're in Red Wing, give me a call. Let's get together.
Hey, will do, sir. Thanks very much. Best to you and your people.
Okay, thank you, Colonel. I'll give it back to our co-chairs. Thank you.
Thanks again, Colonel. Thank you, Mayor Dowse. We now want to turn to our speakers joining us from the White House. In the same way we teamed up to secure a speaker for Vice President Biden, our outreach to the White House for this meeting has been in partnership with our sister organization, the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, which you'll recall represents all the mayors along the Great Lakes on both the Canada and the U.S. sides. I'm honored to have the chair of the Great Lakes Mayors, Mike Vandersteen, Mayor of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, join us for this piece of our meeting. Mayor Vandersteen, thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to join with you to reach out to our administration representatives, and we're very delighted that they're able to join us and give us a little bit more of a feeling and information on what the administration's view of some of the infrastructure needs that we have and our erosion mitigation needs that are very top priorities for our cities. So I look forward to the presentations, and thank you again for allowing us to participate in your annual meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate your partnership, and thank you very much for helping to secure some speakers from the White House. So for this final segment of the MRCTI annual meeting, we're excited to welcome both Doug Hochsler, Special Assistant to the President and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, as well as the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, former Congressman and former Economic Development Agency Director, John Fleming. Mr. Fleming will join the meeting in a few minutes. So before, I think, did I see him on? John, are you here? Yes, I see Dr. John's here somehow. So I want to recognize Doug to start things off, however. And Doug, the floor is yours to bring greetings on behalf of the President. And I know our mayors would certainly benefit from an update on how the stimulus package negotiations are going. We understand the legislation is locked up in Congress, but we can assure you it is definitely needed, and our cities are facing a significant shortfall in many respects. Some of our members have lost over 60% of their revenue for 2020 due to the pandemic. So revenue replacement is a huge topic we mayors have been working on since the pandemic hit in early March. Doug, welcome. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, mayors. We appreciate the chance to join you today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So appreciate again, the chance to join you today. I'm gonna just mix up the order here just a little bit. I'm joined by Dr. Fleming, and I want to respect his time. So I'm going to reserve the bulk of my comments until the end of the discussion today. And I want to give Dr. Fleming, who's assistant to the president and, as was mentioned, a member of Congress previously and head of the Economic Development Administration at the federal government as part of the Department of Commerce leadership team. But the last several months has been a key member of the president's leadership team here at the White House. Dr. Fleming's going to talk about COVID-19 and our coordination and collaboration with state, local, and tribal leaders there. I'll turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Doug, and it's great to be with mayors along the Mississippi River and extending beyond. My district in Louisiana is the 4th district, which is basically surrounding Shreveport, Bossier, on down just above Lake Charles. Certainly water and river issues are important in my former district as well. But with respect to COVID, I have been attending the coronavirus task force meetings. I've been doing that since the 23rd of March. So As you know, we've been dealing with lots and lots of issues and problems, and really have found solutions along the way. And that has to do with first slowing the spread of the virus, making sure that we don't overwhelm our healthcare system, and then developing therapeutics to be sure that we have good methodologies to treat patients when they get sick enough to require that, and certainly if they get in the hospital. And we have 3 of those, as you know: remdesivir, dexamethasone, and convalescent plasma. As a result of that, the case fatality rates have dropped precipitously, even in the elderly, where it was peaked at 30%. It's down in those over age 70, down to around 3%. And also, people who do come down with this infection, because of the methodologies we've developed, wearing face masks, social distancing, washing hands, that means that a younger, more robust group of the population, segment of the population, is really the majority of people who get sick with this, and they recover very nicely. As they return to work and as they return to school, they can take the burden of risk much better than the elderly and those who have chronic diseases. All that being said, we are returning to sort of a new normal life, and we'll be doing this until we have to the general population a safe and effective vaccine, which we expect by the end of the year. And progress is going very well. It could even occur before then. But that's what's going to end the pandemic, is when we develop 1 or more vaccines to do that. Now, I think from your viewpoint, what you're concerned about is the resources that COVID-19 has drained from your revenues, the things that you've had to do in order to deal with this, but also having to limit businesses in your areas, either through your own mandates or those from your governors. And there's no question that it's got to be hitting your tax coffers and draining your budgets. As you know, we've had a lot of resistance from Nancy Pelosi in the House to going forward with what we think is a very reasonable package for Phase 4 CARES Act. She's been demanding something above $3 trillion. We've been talking about 1.2 to 1.5 trillion. And it looks like we may be seeing a little bit of daylight peek in between the cracks here, because there is a bipartisan group of members of the House, of course, Democrats and Republicans, that are demanding their leadership to go forward with a package that might be in the range of 1.2 to 1.8 trillion. So we are beginning to see a little movement, but because there is more that needs to be done. We do need to help out. We as Republicans want to be sure that we restore budgets in cities and states that are affected. Where we draw the line is, we don't want to take care of irresponsible spending habits that go back years, perhaps even decades. So quite frankly, that's really the dividing line. And I think we can come up with a good compromise, but the focus needs to be to restore our municipalities, our states, back to where they were before COVID, and make sure through our PPP program and other things that our healthcare system and our businesses are healthy once again. But anything beyond that, going back in time to restore budgets that have nothing to do with COVID, I think is really a bridge too far here in Washington. Again, we're working on vaccines, and whatever we do come out with, 1 or more, I can assure you will be fully safe and effective. It has to be proven through the Data and Safety Committee, which is nonpartisan. It has to pass muster with the career officials at FDA. So there's no political power that can push this through. It has to pass muster with the experts, the scientists, and it won't be released. And in fact, there are many that say that it will actually be more effective, safer, I should say, because we're going to have 30,000, maybe 50,000 volunteers, much more than we normally have, with vaccines. And so that gives us that extra measure of safety that we want to have. But I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
Any questions for Dr. Fleming?
I don't have a question, Mayor Gallagher, but I just wanted to say hello to Dr. Fleming from Louisiana and thank him for being on the call today to give us the briefing. And certainly, as we have been working to mitigate COVID-19, not only here in our state, but all of our Mississippi River cities and towns, any assistance from any point is certainly welcomed, recognizing that and I don't have to tell you the impact that is certainly having on all of us from a physical point of view as we talk about access to health care, and certainly from an economic point of view as we try to stand up our communities in the midst of this global pandemic. But just wanted to appreciate you taking your time out once again to reach out and respond. Thank you so much.
Yes, Mayor Weston, Broome, yes, you've been a stalwart leader in Baton Rouge and very distinguished career in the legislature, as I recall. So, yeah, thank you for the shout out. And yeah, call upon us. Any help that we can provide, we're more than happy to do that. And I'm delighted to see that I-10 has been a lot of work happening there to widen I-10, which is so necessary as Baton Rouge is growing so rapidly. So we appreciate all the work there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug, did you have anything that you wanted to add at this point? Thank you very much, Deputy Director or Deputy Chief Fleming, for your comments.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fleming, for coming. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think I've said all I need to say and maybe a little bit more.
We appreciate that.
No, it's a pleasure being with you, quite a privilege for me, and certainly the Chief of Staff's office, as well, obviously, as intergovernmental affairs, is at your service. So call upon us if you need anything, and I'll turn things back over to Doug.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Fleming. Again, thanks for the opportunity for both of us to join you today. I just wanted to share a few thoughts on maybe some of the President's economic priorities as we all look to drive the economy forward as we recover from COVID-19 and continue to deal with the pandemic. And as Dr. Fleming all work diligently toward solutions on the not only the vaccine front, but also on therapeutics and other drugs and best practices to deal with the vaccine, deal with the COVID-19. I want to just talk a little bit about what I think are some shared priorities with the mayors on the call, both from the Great Lakes perspective, but also from the Mississippi River. I grew up in Iowa, in north central Iowa. So I, not on the Mississippi, but on one of the tributaries to the Mississippi, pretty close. And my folks still live and farm there. So I have roots in the organizations that that are on the call today, and both the Mississippi Valley, but also the Midwest writ large. I wanted to just share a little bit about on COVID-19. One last thing. We have hosted at the federal government level now over 900 federally organized calls with our state, local, and tribal partners on COVID-19 alone since January. And that's touched about 240,000 state, local, and tribal leaders along the way. And so we want to continue to collaborate with you as we all work together to tackle an unprecedented challenge with unprecedented solutions at every level of government, at the federal, state, local, and tribal level. And so we want to make sure that we work with each of you as we continue to tackle those challenges. And we do national programming, which many of you probably participate in. We'd love to get your feedback on content that you'd like to see on those calls. On the economic front, the president has prioritized deregulation and smarter regulation at the federal level, but also encouraged that at the state and local and tribal level as well. At the federal level, we tackled the previously broken waters of the U.S. rule that was burdensome from the Obama Biden administration. And we sought collaboration and feedback from state, local, and tribal leaders early on in the administration. And then in the last year, advanced the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, which again better empowers state and local officials and tribal officials to make decisions on the waterways within their jurisdiction. And so on many of those smaller waterways. And so that's an important action that we work with state and local leaders on to have more sound regulatory approach. I saw a map of the state of Iowa, the previous Obama-Biden administration rule would have impacted 97% of Iowa's land. That's not just farmland, that's land total. And so that was unworkable. Also, another recent example, just this week, the National Environmental Protection Act, as updated by the Trump administration, went into effect. Why is that important? It's important if you want to develop your community in an environmentally sensitive way. It's important if the farmers in your community want to put a water quality project on the farm without spending tens of thousands of dollars on a lawyer or a permit at the federal government level. And so that went into effect this week, and we want to continue to move that forward. We have started an initiative called the Governor's Initiative on Regulatory Innovation, which includes governors, tribal leaders, other state leaders, legislators, mayors, county commissioners, and other leaders around the country. I think we've got 800 state and local leaders who have signed up to be part of that initiative. Basically, it's anybody who wants to drive smarter and less regulation at the state and local and tribal level, and aligning state and federal and local regulations, and reducing unnecessary burdens like occupational licensing reform. And so that's something that we work with governors and other state and local leaders on. At the federal level, the Trump administration's efforts to advance deregulation are estimated to increase incomes of the average family by $3,100 per year when all the regulations go into effect. That's real money in people's pocketbooks. That's not counting the tax cuts, which also put more money in people's, or let people keep more of their own money in their pocketbooks. We've also renegotiated trade deals that are important to not only the Great Lakes states, but the Mississippi Valley states as well. And so we want to make sure that we continue to have fairer trade that are good for American workers, that are will drive economic health in the communities along not only the Great Lakes, but the Mississippi. Probably every mayor on this call in the 30 years that NAFTA was in effect probably saw negative impacts from a manufacturing perspective in the communities. In fact, if you look on the map, it's right along the Mississippi River and in the Great Lakes that saw a negative impact from NAFTA on jobs going overseas. So what did the president do about it? The president sat down, got the attention of Mexico and Canada, and negotiate a better trade deal, one that looks out for American workers, American farmers, and American innovators. And it also has a small business chapter. It has environmental protection like no other trade deal has had before. It has labor provisions that make sure that Mexico can't take advantage of American workers. And so it holds accountability. And I think that's something that you all should welcome. As I imagine, manufacturing and trade exporting businesses are important to your communities. We also have the China One phase trade deal, which again is particularly important for moving exports down the Mississippi. A lot of soybeans go down that river to China and other goods as well. On the urban revitalization and rural prosperity front, we work with community leaders and state leaders on the Opportunity Zone effort and initiative. And we'd love to work with you if you're part of that. Obviously, governors designated those opportunity zones, but there's thousands of them, I think about 8,000 or 9,000 around the country. So your communities may be positively impacted by that investment. And then on investing and protecting our public lands and parks, just recently, this summer, August 4th, the President signed the Great American Outdoors Act, which really is a historic bipartisan law, the largest ever investment into our America's national parks and public lands. It fully funds the Land and Water Conservation Fund at $900 million annually. So it gives certainty as well as that funding, and also creates the National Parks and Public Land Legacy Restoration Fund. And so again, that's important, and from not only from a environmental conservation perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective as well. We've also advanced pro-growth energy policies. Under this administration, American families and American manufacturers can pay less for the energy that they need to grow their business and fuel their manufacturing lines. And so we want to make sure that we continue to lower energy costs at the pump, to heat people's homes, to turn the lights on, and to drive manufacturing, with energy being such an important part of manufacturing competitiveness in a competitive global world. And so we want to make sure that we continue to focus on those energy policies being pro-growth. And for the first time under this administration, the U.S. is now a net exporter of energy for the first time in 70 years. And so those are really important jobs in Louisiana and Mississippi, but all the way up into the Ohio River Valley as well. And so the last thing I want to mention, just a couple projects that I think are particularly important to the Great Lakes states. The President invested $320 million in the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative in his most recent budget request to support the world's largest freshwater resource, and also has dedicated funding in the recent budgets to Soo Locks as well, so an important infrastructure project there. And then finally, a recovery fund. I traveled with the President down to Louisiana a couple Saturdays ago to meet with state and local officials in Texas and Louisiana as well. And so we continue to keep an eye on the storms, another storm impacting the upper Gulf Coast. But we had a derecho that hit Iowa and other Midwestern states. And so we want to make sure that we continue to be there for our citizens in the time of need. And disaster recovery is a locally executed, state managed, and federally supported effort. And so with that, I'd be glad to take a few questions.
Any questions for Doug? Are you seeing any, Brant, in the chat?
I am not, Mayor Gallagher.
Okay. I know one of the items that...
Oh, go ahead, Mayor. Sorry.
Go ahead, Colin.
No, I think you were about to go there anyway. Go ahead.
I know one of the items that we are working on that may be of interest to you is our Resilience Revolving Loan Fund Act, which could help us become more resilient to floods, wildfires, hurricanes, all the things we face in our corridor. The act passed the House and is awaiting floor consideration in the Senate. I'm positive White House support of that innovative tool for us could help make all the difference in the Senate. Are you aware of the Loan Fund Act, and what are your thoughts on any support? If we're catching you off guard, that's okay too. You can tell us that. We understand, Doug.
I would love to take a look at it if you could send me some information on it. I would. There was some important reforms passed to the Disaster Reform and Relief Act a couple of years ago that moved a lot more money from the disaster relief fund that flows to state and local governments to the mitigation side of the discussion, which I think fits nicely into this resilience discussion that you all are keenly interested in. And so that greatly increases the amount of money that, instead of just responding to every storm and building back the way it was before, this puts a lot more money on the mitigation side of the equation. And so I really encourage you, if you haven't sat down with your state emergency manager and your state flood control leaders, I would encourage you to do so, to have a conversation on how you can leverage those funds to drive mitigation and more resilience in the communities that you serve. But I'd be glad to take a look at the Resilience Wild Flood Act.
So we will get you that information so that you can take a look at it. The concept is exactly what it sounds like. It's to build resiliency. Even though those changes came a few years ago, we've still continued to struggle to get FEMA money or other money to build into our resiliency. We look at the river as a living organism together, as Mayor Dowse indicated, and working together along the entire corridor is important to all of us. So it allows us, or if it's passed, it will allow us to do larger projects and to be able to keep the fund rolling. So we'll get you some information on that. We also had a presentation today from FEMA on the BRIC fund. So we took a look at some of the more specific portions of that today. We were introduced to it a year or so ago, and then in March when we had our DC meeting, we met with FEMA. So there's some other feelers out for ways that we can build resiliency in the corridor. So we'd appreciate you taking a look. I appreciate that, Doug.
Great.
Any other questions based on that? Well, first we want to thank Doug and John so much for being with us today. Mayor Broome and I, as well as Mayor Vandersteen, all look forward to working with you more to meet the tremendous challenges we face not only as a nation, but in our corridor as well. Before we adjourn, Mayor Broome and I want to convey our heartfelt gratitude to all of the mayors that presided and who took part today, including and especially our friends along the Great Lakes corridor. We know a virtual platform is a far cry from the very special place-based annual meetings we typically have, and the time in between sessions when we can get together and catch up on our families and the things that we're doing in our cities that may also be of interest and helpful to one another. So we're sorry. We really wish we could have gotten together. But thank you all for joining us in this virtual meeting, and we hope you are all well and COVID-free. Mayor Broome?
Yes, I will second that, Mayor Gallagher. You know, one of the things that has emerged, as you well know, as a result of this new reality of COVID-19 is that we've had to be very innovative and creative. And so this is our first, I believe, virtual annual meeting. And we look forward to our next meeting, however, in Washington, D.C. in March. It will be March 2nd through the 4th, and it's still scheduled to be a live event as of now. That's something else we've also learned navigating a global pandemic and other issues is that we have to be very fluid and staying ready to make adjustments. But right now we're planning on being in Washington, March 2nd through the 4th. And it may end up being a different kind of meeting that is part virtual, part in person, but we're going to have a presence in the nation's capital this March to make the Mississippi River Corridor part of the new Congress's agenda for sure. We hope that everyone can be with us in my city of Baton Rouge, September 14th through the 16th of 2021 for the next MRCTI annual meeting. It's a beautiful day here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so much so that I decided to spend the rest of my afternoon working remotely and being part of this conference remotely from my back porch. So that shows you again what is happening as a result of our new reality. And so I want to thank everyone and look forward to seeing you in March on March 2nd. And with that, we stand adjourned.